All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday, June 18th City Council regular meeting. I will have our city clerk start with our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Karen Howe.
Here.
Councilmember Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Sid Gupta.
Here.
Councilmember Roshina Farrell.
Here.
Great, thank you so much. Councilmember Lamb, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Deputy Mayor Howe, if you will do our land acknowledgement, please.
The city is a proud partner of the Snoqualmie tribe, and we feel it is important to recognize the history and connection tribes have always had to these lands. Therefore, we will now read our statement. We acknowledge that we are on indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved the treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Great, thank you so much. First up, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you. All right, so we have public comment. We'll start in the room and then move to online. Carrie?
My name is Carrie Bosworth. I'm a Sammamish resident. Good evening, City Council and City staff. I am here tonight with some friends, and it's a good night to come. We're celebrating in advance our 25th anniversary, and we want to tell you about some of the things we love about Sammamish. So I will start. Sammamish to me is a city of neighbors. In the past, I never spoke to my neighbors before. I don't really know why, it just never happened. But one night, shortly after I moved in, I was on my back deck and a neighbor popped their head through the bushes. She introduced herself and we started to chat until she said something she regretted. And then we said a quick goodnight. The next day, she rang my doorbell and she thrust a plate of brownies into my face and said, "I am so sorry for what I said last night." And I said, "There's no reason to be sorry. Like, you didn't offend me, it's fine." I took her brownies and they were delicious. We would meet often in between our homes and talk about our lives. I became friends with my other neighbors on the other side of my house, across the street, throughout the neighborhood, and quickly throughout the entire city. When she, Laverne, moved all too soon, I brought a gift over and said hello to the new neighbor. Thus, the cycle repeats. Thank you, Sammamish, for creating and fostering a lovely community, even if we don't always agree or have exactly the same point of view on something. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Have a good meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Thiro Oshini?
Hello, my name is Thirloshini Raghu, and I'm here from Creekside Elementary. I moved to Sammamish about 4 years ago, and so far, I love it here. The main reason I love Sammamish is because it's extremely peaceful. It's home to 10 parks, amazing places, and a very safe community. Everywhere I go, I always see so much greenery and many, many trees. This town has 650 acres of parks. But there's more to Sammamish. It's the 13th safest town in the country and the safest town in Washington. The crime rate is incredibly low here. Sammamish is just a town where you stop worrying. It's such a happy, social place. Some of my favorite places in Sammamish are Sammamish State Park, the KCLS Library, and Sammamish Commons. Sammamish State Park is beautiful with a cafe, playground, and a lake where you can swim. My favorite part of this park is the zip line that they have. The KCLS Library, located in Sammamish Commons, is a relaxing spot equipped with computers, printers, and a wide selection of books. Sammamish Commons also has picnic areas, gardens, a skate park, and a spray park. Fun events like the farmers market and Easter egg hunts also happen there. Sammamish is peaceful, but not lonely. It's very social with so many fun events. My favorite event, which is coming up very soon actually, is the 4th on the Plateau. It's an amazing evening which I always look forward to every year. It's also where I made some of my most unforgettable memories, just playing games, enjoying the fireworks, eating to my heart's content, and being happy. In conclusion, Sammamish is simply awesome, and there's still so much more about it, like its delicious international cuisines, its endless outdoor fun, and quality education. Sammamish is not only where I live, but where I call home. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come every week. Okay. Loran?
Good evening. My name is Laron. I live in Sammamish, and I'm a 5th grade grad from Creekside Elementary. This town has been standing for almost 25 years, showing its glory to everyone. Sammamish is our home, and I enjoy it. The day I moved to Sammamish, I felt like it was going to be peaceful and quiet, with lots of unfamiliar people. In the following weeks, my perspective changed. Yes, it was usually quiet and peaceful, but I saw other things in this place. I saw friendship, I saw kindness, and I saw opportunity. We were already talking to our neighbors. I was able to do a handful of things. I felt like there were so many people I might get to know later. I felt great excitement. Sammamish also has so many things to do in it. I love visiting parks. They're filled with greenery and fun, from taking a walk to just playing around. We also check out new books at the library, do tricks in the scooter park, and work out at the YMCA. The lakes all look so good and make a wonderful place to swim. All around us, we are supplied with every store we need. Sammamish is a comfortable area. Every day, I admire all the sights: mountains, plants, and lakes. The view is always fresh, from a faraway mountain range to a grassy area full of trees. There are so many creatures here, both big and small. Our town is a beautiful place full of life. There's something else. It makes me feel happy all the time. Everybody is so kind. I remember exchanging small gifts with our neighbors, like blueberries, and helping each other, like the times our neighbor mowed our lawn for us. Countless friends have been made here, and so many moments have been spent socializing. Sammamish is a bonded place. Our city is filled with nice people, nature, and places to go. It symbolizes comfort, excitement, and kindness. Sammamish never gets old, no matter what. It's an amazing and friendly town that is beautiful. Together, let's wish this place a happy 25th anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you. Ayanesh?
Sammamish is a lively town with diverse and vibrant culture. People from all walks of life live in our city, and we have lots of characteristics which make me proud to call Sammamish home. Some things I love about our city are the great places to eat, many parks, and awesome culture of the people living here. One of my favorite places to eat is Metropolitan Market. The wide selections of food there make it a great place for many people to enjoy. I especially love eating things like dumplings and the ramen there. Additionally, in Sammamish, one can find much more than the classic cuisine, as there are Lebanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Indian, Japanese, and Mexican cuisines. Make sure there are options for everyone, and everyone is included. In fact, Sammamish does a lot of things to make sure everyone is included. Sammamish offers many great opportunities for everyone to get outside and have lots of fun. This is shown through all of the awesome community parks that Sammamish offers. Personally, I like to go to Everett Park because it is close to my house and offers many things for people to do, like basketball, tennis, badminton, pickleball, football, and many more. An awesome thing that Sammamish has done is make lots of great parks around the city, making it easy for anyone to go enjoy themselves outdoors, which is especially important during summertime. Though Sammamish has all these wonderful things to offer, sometimes not everyone knows many of the key things, say if they're new. Don't you think Sammamish needs something that really makes it its own city? Like, what if we take a look at other cities like Redmond, a place where big companies were founded, or even Issaquah, which is famous for its historic downtown. Sammamish needs something that it is really remembered for. So that is what I will leave you with today. Come up with something that Sammamish can be known for. Share your ideas, spread the word. That's all I'm asking you to do. Make Sammamish an even greater city. Once again, my name's Ayanch. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Thank you. All right, Mary, you're up. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mary Wichter. I've lived in Sammamish for 24 years. So I'm pretty sure you guys have seen this map before. It's the emergency map for landslide hazards and steep slopes hazards for Tamarack, where I live. And I started speaking originally in 2015, but in 2013, the city had really had landslides and a lot of flooding problems, so they developed some emergency surface water ordinances. There were 5 of them, and it reads, whereas plats approved prior to 1977, historic plats, were not subject to surface water and stormwater regulations, and that the city has landslide hazard areas that have risk due to geology, topography, and hydrologic factors. Whereas the city has observed that when development occurs on previously vacant lots in historic plats that drain onto landslide hazards areas, there is a greater possibility for deleterious discharges associated with surface and stormwater when development is not tight-lined below the landslide hazard area. And I didn't know deleterious, I think it's one of those legal terms, but it's for basically harmful, damaging, detrimental, and injurious, because a landslide really is a severe thing. So this is a picture above where I live in Tamarack. You can see a stormwater ditch here, and the water's very white. Like if you've ever seen people kayak or go whitewater rafting, it means the water's really fast and forceful. You'll also see it takes a 90-degree turn, which is really unusual, and it's because there's been so many houses built up that that water has to go somewhere, and the soils are saturated. The city also likes to say, oh, Tamarack has private roads, so we can't do anything. In this photo, there's no rain. There's no water coming off the roads at all. The roads have been in since 2009. They haven't changed. There weren't problems. It was 2013 when all the development occurred. So since it's going here, it really is a flooding problem, and there needs to be a project dealt with it very similar to this. So I've worked a long time to get code, and in 2016, there was a city meeting held in March. It was run by city staff, and it said, hey, as a property owner, we want to do this project, and in order to do so, we'd have to have public drainage easements. Everyone was in agreement at the meeting. Almost every neighbor attended. Those that didn't gave their support before or after, and signed right of entry agreements, and a survey was done. So there are public drainage easements that could be obtained. Also, Tamarack, I'm over 60, and 1958, 1959, Tamarack does have easements for ingress, egress, that's going in and out, and utility purposes. Sammamish Plateau Water does public water and public sewer for us using those. In fact, they insist on not having public drainage easements because they like the ones from 58 and 59. So I wanted to speak a little bit to Tamarack tonight, and I hope that you'll be interested in learning more about it and having the project done.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that didn't get a chance to sign up? All right, online?
Mayor, while we're waiting for online, if I may, if we could ask the young people that spoke when public comment is done, we'd love to get a photo with council with our young folks talking about the Silver Jubilee. So if families would stick around for just a minute afterwards, we'll take a quick break and take a photo if that's okay. Thank you.
Per the new reasonable accommodation, those who have pre-registered by 3 o'clock today, please raise your hand if you wish to give testimony. There's no commenters.
Great, thank you so much. Let's take that photo then, and we'll be right back just momentarily.
You'll do it just off to the side so we don't get the giant, kind of where Sid is. So we can avoid the. Come on. Yeah, they don't bite much.
All right, next up, we have executive session. We have potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)I. No anticipation, or no action is anticipated following the session. And do you think 15 minutes, Carrie, or?
15 minutes should suffice. Why don't we just say we'll return at 7:05?
Thank you for doing that for me. Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll be back at 7:05. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have our consent calendar. I will entertain a motion to pass that.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any questions or comment on consent? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Our first presentation is Mark online, probably. Okay. The Emergency Management Assessment and Evacuation Annex Plan. Mark and Kelly, the consultant.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. Mark Barrett, Admin Services Director. In late 2023, we engaged AC Disaster Consulting, or ACDC, to complete the assessment of the city's emergency management and emergency operations center capacities. Also included in this work was a review of the city's evacuation annex and the evacuation study, with the goal of updating the annex with the information gleaned from the study. ACDC are here this evening to present their work and to share their recommendations. After that, I'll share some details about how we're operationalizing their recommendations during the remainder of 2024 and into 2025. At this time, I'll turn it over to Kelly with ACDC for the presentation. Kelly?
Thank you, Mark. Just a moment, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. As noted, my name is Kelly Simpson, and I'm with AC Disaster Consulting. Earlier this year, we were tasked with conducting an assessment of the city's emergency management program using the 2023 Emergency Management Accreditation Program standards. We are also tasked with updating the city's evacuation plan, utilizing a study conducted in 2021. And I'm here today to present the findings of that assessment and provide a high-level overview of updates to the evacuation plan informed by that study. So the assessment portion of this presentation is divided into an overview of the assessment and a summary of findings. We will cover each of these summary findings and strategies in depth, and I'll pause for questions, and then we will review highlights of the evacuation plan. So the purpose of an emergency management program is identifying community-specific risk, and this often is accomplished through historical and recent data review and hazard and population assessments. So identifying community capabilities and where building and sustaining those resources is necessary. Part of an emergency management program is planning activities and coordinating these capabilities with other partners and testing or validating these plans and procedures to ensure efficacy. So the analysis was conducted following the recommendations and best practices outlined by the 2023 Emergency Management Accreditation Program, also known as EMAP. EMAP is an independent nonprofit organization, and it is a voluntary accreditation program that establishes and maintains standards for emergency management programs. It is designed as an evaluation tool for continuous improvement of preparedness for all levels of emergency management programs. And it covers a series of topics and sections to standardize emergency preparedness programs, which you can see listed here. So as part of this assessment, we reviewed the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, the Emergency Operations Center Procedures Manual, and other supporting documents. We conducted interviews with city personnel to discuss activation procedures during emergency response situations and went on site to gain a full understanding of the EOC layout and structural composition. We found that the city's program is very thorough and comprehensive, meeting the requirements of the majority of the EMAP program categories listed in the previous slide. We only highlighted 3 overarching areas that could be enhanced: operational procedures, technological integration, and training and exercises with subcategories that we will review in depth in the next few slides. And you will see that some of these categories overlap. So internal operational procedures primarily focus on enhancing program administration, plan implementation, and evaluation. EMAP recommends establishing procedures and action plans and supporting documents in advance where possible. And often these items can be formed when conducting emergency exercises. Designating or delegating tracking and maintenance of coordinating activities for elements of the emergency management program would enhance these operations and procedures in the event of an emergency. Some options to accomplish this could be through exercising hazard-specific guidelines and procedures to create a scenario-based incident action plan, or identify templates and language that may be needed during emergencies. It would also be beneficial to source, track, and pursue grant opportunities to support emergency management program activities, and identifying available internal resources and confirming and tracking that these supplies that support the city's emergency operations center functions are periodically renewed and available when needed. Some examples of that, these supplies that support the emergency operations center functions would be food stock, backup generator fuel, batteries, and other support equipment and storage infrastructure for that equipment. So strategic management and maintenance were also highlighted as areas for enhancement. The city has an extensive strategic plan that outlines when and how the emergency management plan and associated support documents will be evaluated, revised, and maintained. And if the city were to seek EMAP accreditation, those activities would need to be documented, which could mean meeting minutes, meeting schedules and topics, agendas, or revisions to documents. It would be beneficial to delegate organizing and documenting activities that inform stakeholders and encourage that involvement in emergency management program activities, and to ensure these activities continue to take place in an organized way. Next, we have coordinating with partners. The theme here, as you can tell, is coordination. And in emergency management, there are many external partners and actors involved that support essential parts of your response. So it's beneficial to establish communication with your response partners and utilize them to support your program, as well as determine which resources the city may need that they can provide and supplement. Partners can include private entities like utility companies, volunteer organizations like the CERT program, or surrounding jurisdictions. The next area is resource management, mutual aid, and logistics. Most jurisdictions or organizations do not own and maintain all the resources necessary to address all potential threats and hazards. What is needed is identifying critical resources that are supported by your external partners and forming networks that ensure communication and support to meet these needs. Effective resource management includes leveraging each jurisdiction's resources, engaging private sector resources, again, involving your volunteer organizations, and encouraging further development of mutual aid agreements. So with this in mind, areas such as animal evacuation planning and donation and volunteer coordination are often challenging areas that most communities lean on their external partners to manage and support. The city's role here would be identifying where and what those needs are and sourcing who can meet those needs. Technological integration falls within the resource tracking and assessing that we discussed previously. Technology and backup pathways are essential to smooth response operations, and it would be beneficial to ensure technology resources, specifically related to communication networks, are sufficient to meet emergency needs. So this includes backup power for these networks, planning backup protocol, ensuring sufficient equipment like radios, and planning procedures that recall staff when communications are down in an emergency, and providing training in these procedures and associated equipment. Additionally, establishing sensitive data management practices for departments, which can include identifying sensitive data the department may handle, any storage needs they may have, and providing training as needed. And finally, informing the public as to where information will be disseminated with and without available communication networks is also recommended. Training and exercises strategically test the emergency operation plan. Again, the city has an excellent strategic management plan covering regional planning efforts that are hazard specific, outlining areas for training, specific sections of the emergency management program, and departments that will lead these efforts. It's very thorough. So coordinating, tracking, and documenting these activities would be essential to any EMAP accreditation. Increasing the frequency of these activities through section-specific or hazard-specific exercises is recommended, and will help encourage familiarity with operations and will also identify your key partners. Also, cross-training can enhance operational flexibility in the event personnel are unable to get to the city to conduct any operations. Public outreach is key to setting public expectations and protecting public health and safety. City residents and visitors should be informed of the emergency plan contents, including how they will receive notifications, which evacuation routes to use, what to do if they need transportation assistance, and where they can locate supplies. The city has a vast library of engaging materials and resources that provide the public with tips to prepare for emergencies. I was incredibly impressed by how accessible the material is. I live in Florida. I was able to find it very, very quickly. It was very easy to locate on your website, and it covers a wide range of topics. It is recommended to continue highlighting these materials with just strategic timing, such as maybe before fire season, and to display materials in public settings where possible, like public libraries and community centers, and of course, document these activities. EMAP really likes to see these activities documented. So there are many moving parts to coordinating an emergency management program, and it is recommended to designate coordination responsibilities to oversee, track, and manage crucial areas. This could include delegating to city personnel, delegating to Emergency Operations Center, assigned personnel or department leads, or working with agencies or tasking a steering committee. And a general overview of these responsibilities would include developing, updating, or revising the city's basic emergency operation plan and steering the overall management of the program in line with the city's strategic plan schedule. It includes coordinating activities of city departments, agencies, and partners that support response efforts in the city plan, expanding coordination to include plans and programs with neighboring jurisdictions, and especially developing working agreements to ensure coordinated response. And it can also mean procuring personnel and resources as needed, and coordinating exercises to simulate emergency procedures and conditions. And of course, making any recommendations to council for ordinance, policy, or procedural updates based on these revisions and exercises. And that concludes the assessment piece, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Deputy Mayor Howe?
Thank you, Kelly. It's very helpful to see this. The thing, the overriding impression I had from after reading the document is that it appears we have a plan, but I don't understand the gap between plan and execution. There were several gaps that were identified, but I am not clear what it's going to take to fill those gaps. And to give an example, is it the next phase of this to understand, for example, how many staff have been trained in FEMA 100? How many of our critical emergency managers actually live in Sammamish? How many resources do we need to potentially hire to fill those gaps? Or do we need to hire? Who are the agencies we're working with? Where is our mutual aid and assistance coming from? Is it only coming from King County, or is it coming from Issaquah and Redmond? I mean, I'm just trying to understand all the rest of the connecting dots that go with this. And is that in the next phase of this process?
Yes, I would say that the next steps would be to do a thorough assessment of all of those aspects of areas that personnel need to be trained in, areas that resources may need to be built out. So it would really be a major piece of this would be doing a full assessment of your available resources and also doing exercises to determine where those gaps lie. So when you have your personnel who are part of that response team come together and do those exercises, that's where you can identify some of these pieces that either may not be very familiar or may need additional resources from outside the city, or you need backup operations and procedures for, like you said, when staff may not be able to access the city in a big emergency because of, transportation networks, for example.
Right. Would budget also be part of the second phase? Because there needs to be budget to support the activity. So I'm trying to understand, where does the budget come into this?
Yeah, and if I may quickly, that is kind of the second part of this.
Okay.
ACDC took a look at where we stood and a route that we may want to take in order to get where we want to go. And when Kelly is finished, I'm going to follow up with some details on what we have been doing, what we're doing for the rest of this year, and what we're going to be doing next year in terms of operationalizing the recommendations.
Okay, that sounds really good. The other piece I was going to ask for specifically was all of the answers to the stakeholder questions. Because they were really good and interesting questions, but I don't know where the answers are, or are they buried in the report? And I just didn't understand that.
They were pretty much consolidated into the report. I can see if we have I know we have notations, but I can see if we have a consolidated list of those answers for you that I can
That's
get.
kind of what I assumed, that basically your green highlighted text appeared to be some of the answers, but I'd be very curious to see kind of what the direct response was if you captured that. The final comment that I have, or the question I have actually, has to do with your hazard rank. And in specific, I'm concerned about the low ranking for extreme heat, given the fact that we lost 126 people in Seattle over 2 months in 2021, when that's an extreme heat event. It looks like there's a push for FEMA to recognize that extreme heat is something that they may need to respond to. Do you have any thoughts on that?
And quickly, Kelly, I think I can take this because that was a table that came from our comprehensive emergency management plan, I believe. Is that correct, Kelly?
That's correct.
And that was put together in the early days of when we were updating the 2023 plan in conjunction with our emergency management committee. And at the time, it was led by our Eastside Fire and Rescue partners in emergency management. And so it was input that came from individuals, including police and fire and all of the departments. And so it might be ripe for an update.
Okay.
But I didn't want to have Kelly to have to take the responsibility for it. That just came right from our paperwork.
Okay, I look forward to an update. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I just had one question to add to Council Member or to Deputy Mayor House insights. As part of the evacuation support annex or plan, it mentions a plan distribution list that this plan will be updated periodically, and then this is the form in which we're going to list all the agencies or jurisdictions that will receive the updated copy of the report. Will City Council be part of that distribution list? And it's on page 9 of that report of the City of Sammamish Evacuation Support Annex. Page 9 of the report, page 64 of our packet. And I just would hope that City Council will be on that distribution list.
Yes, City Council should be on the distribution list, absolutely.
Okay, great. And then the last thing I had, did we have, and I'm going to, first of all, I wanted to thank you as well, that on page 42, we have a glossary of all of the acronyms. That was wonderful to see that because I was referring back to that all the time. And then it refers to a CEMP committee that will be made up of volunteers. Have we ever had such a committee in Sammamish before? So this would be something new for us, which I think would be amazing if we were establishing that, and we would have our volunteers involved in that. But we've never had such a thing before. No.
My understanding was that this was a previously existing steering committee that may, and Mark may be able to speak better to this than I can.
Okay.
Yes, when we began our update for the CEMP, we formed this committee with the idea that it would continue on as the emergency management committee that is required. And so it participated, you may recall, in forming of the CEMP and reviewing it. In fact, that was the group that did the work on the table that we spoke about a couple of minutes ago.
Okay.
And it will be, and I'll talk about it in a couple of minutes, but the intent is for it to continue on and to help inform our efforts.
Okay, and who's that made up of? Is that made up of residents of Sammamish, or is it made up of, experts in this field, or who is in that committee?
It's made up of decision-making level entities from each department in the city, the Sammamish Police Department, Eastside Fire and Rescue. That particular committee is an internal committee. There is a place, and there are times where there can be some community representation. We did not happen to have that as we were doing our CEMP work.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Lamb.
I had a quick question. One of the the documents that ACDC was provided was the 2020 King County Hazard Mitigation Plan and City of Sammamish Jurisdictional Annex Plan. I took a look at that plan. The plan had topics that included 2 5-year and long-term goals, and there's overlap. There was, what would we do in case of a cybersecurity attack? Transportation, what would we do for an evacuation plan? So, you know, there were goals set in 2020, and I just wanted to know what became of that plan. And like, as far as I'm aware, there was no follow-up on that plan, because here we are today talking about the same things, basically.
That particular plan has recently been updated in working with King County. They made it available to all of the cities, I believe, that have a component within their plan. And we've been working along with Public Works and a few other departments to update that plan. And I think we recently passed a draft back to them. So at the moment, the update's a work in progress.
Okay, so there were plans specifically that we were tasked with, that we created, that we were gonna create an evacuation plan. We were gonna do like a whole community resilience plan. And so I guess I'm just not clear as to, it seems like we have a lot of process documents. We have a CEMP, we had the evacuation time study, and now we have this. I'm seeing a lot of process. I'm not seeing a lot of things being operationalized.
And I think that goes to the point that Kelly made about the need to train and exercise the plans. And that's part of the reason why we had ACDC come in to take a look at exactly where we were at, to see what training of what type and for whom it made the most sense to do right off the bat to move us down the road. And then for us to be able to plan and do some regular exercising of those.
Okay, so I look forward to seeing the timeline. Thanks.
All right, I'm not seeing hands at the moment, but Mark, did you say Councilmember Treen?
Yeah, thanks. So prior to me coming on the council in 2019, so starting in 2020, Mark, well, you weren't here either. So the city at the time in 2019 had not participated in any kind of evacuation or emergency activities that I was aware of. And I've been here since 2010. So in 2020, the council at the time set aside some time, and we spent a lot of effort to put in an emergency management program, and even hired a coordinator at the time to help us meet some of the safety requirements that were being set down by the state and King County too. Fast forward, we get through a pandemic. So my question first, Mark, and the consultant is, did you look at the response of the city of Sammamish to the pandemic, which would be a clear indicator of how we can respond to an emergency?
I can go ahead and answer that. The scope of work for ACDC was to take a look at it from a programmatic point of view. They did ask for and reviewed all of the documents that we have related to emergency management. If there was something there, I didn't find specific things as it relates to emergency management and the setting up of an emergency management center related specifically to that.
So I get what you're saying there, Mark. You're talking about the center, which we're sitting in, correct? Or at least one of them based on the report that you're provided to us right here in front of us, one of those centers we're sitting in right now as a council. The other one would be the MOU, and then there might be use of the Beaver Lake Lodge. So, but the idea is we had a command center in 2020. It was City Hall. And if you were here, as residents who were here, you understand that we were one of the best cities in response to an emergency during 2020. So my next question, so I'm just going to tell you, the information's there, whether you found it or not, that's not on me, that's on you. Sorry if that was offensive. That wasn't my intent. My intent was not to be offensive there. It's just that the information is there. Whether that's at EF&R, if that's with our police, it's there. The second part about this whole, my next question is, because one of the recommendations that the consultant here is bringing to us is to hire an emergency managing program coordinator. So my question is, who is that? Because we used to have one. So who is that now? We don't have one.
I believe the recommendation is to designate a coordinator, to have somebody whose responsibility is for assisting and doing some of those programmatic things like tracking and setting up training, like creating and doing the exercises and such.
Correct.
So I will touch on it in my presentation, but we do have an individual who's a supervising management analyst that has been designated as a coordinator.
Yeah, because we had that in place, and we were actually doing some of those very activities that you're talking about, because we actually had residents here in the city of Sammamish on their hand radios doing not only a local emergency response, but was doing it also statewide and even nationally. And we rated second in that actual simulation due to a point system that was earned by some residents here in Sammamish. So it's not like, so my point again is the data is out there. There's information out there that I just wonder if our consultant is aware of, that we have had, or we do have, or should have in place some of the stuff that they're saying, hey, here's my recommendation, we should be doing these things. Well, they either used to be here or they still exist today. So my question is, have we done a thorough enough investigation into our emergency plan so we actually know who the players are and have the ability to respond again to an emergency? Is that, okay, Mark, is that what you're going to present at the end of this? So am I jumping the gun here and just ahead of the curve? Am I just ahead of the curve, which is cool? I've been there before.
A little bit, council member, but just quickly, I think to some degree that's what Kelly's saying. She found there are many good things in place, and what we are lacking is being able to track, document, and regularly exercise those in order to show that. And that's part of what we want to put around the good stuff that already exists, is the ability to track and make sure we stay current on training, because we've had some staff turnover, and so some people have come into the organization since some of that training has been done, so that we make sure that people are comfortable with their roles in an EOC environment, and that we regularly train it so that people know for sure what they're going to do. When and if something occurs and we need to utilize it, we've sort of exercised that muscle, if you will.
Thanks. Hey, I may be jumping the gun again here. I don't mean to be doing that, but if that's the case. So on the evacuation plan, there's clearly times for clearing out the city or different evacuation zone, and I believe there's 6 of them, 2 to the north, 2 in the central, 2 to the south of the city. And so for those in the public who are listening, that's just, we've got 6 areas of the city. It's been divided up how we would evacuate the city, and then where would people go depending on where the disaster or the incident has taken place, and then how much time it would take to clear 90%, and then how much it would take to clear 100%. I actually like the 90% numbers. They look reasonable. I wish they were, knowing the constraints on our roadways and the infrastructure, I understand why those numbers are. What's unacceptable to me as a council member, who one of the priorities that we have is safety, is the evacuation time for 100% evacuation of an area, that it's 4 hours and 40 minutes. It's unacceptable for a city this size and with access to highways on both the north and the south, and even out to some degree to, I'll call it northeast and southeast. A little tougher on the southeast, I get that. We'll need to address that with our TIP and TMP. So the question is are you presenting something then again, or a recommendation how we can reduce the time to evacuate areas so that it's less than 4 hours and 40 minutes?
The next part of the presentation will cover, it's going to be a high-level overview of the evacuation plan, but it will cover a lot of that information that was sourced from the study, with some recommendations for just things to consider whenever creating a plan for evacuation.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Council. I did not realize we had 2 presentations for this topic. So, Mark, I don't know if you want to go ahead. Maybe more questions will come up then.
I'm going to go ahead and have Kelly do her. She's a couple of slides on the evacuation plan that was informed by the study. Real quick, and then I.
Sure, I'll go ahead. So this was informed by the evacuation study findings conducted in 2022 by KDL Engineering. The strategies, the evacuation annex is intended to provide planning guidance and preparation and strategies for the city departments. The plan includes characteristics and resources that are unique to Sammamish as identified in that study, which would help with that decision-making process in conjunction with incident-specific circumstances. So, of course, the primary goals and objectives will be, they'll remain the same regardless of whether an evacuation is necessary before or after an incident. All decision-making will be in the best interest of life safety, preserving the health and safety of responders and the public, and protecting property and the environment. And determining the benefit to evacuate versus the impact of evacuating, which will adhere to these overarching principles. So an incident may have warning, which allows populations to be evacuated in a timely and orderly manner, in which case balancing goals and risk can drive decision-making and planning, whereas incidents without warning can require evacuations if an area is unsafe, and can occur during response efforts and will impact evacuation strategies, which we'll discuss in more detail. So, of course, our lead agency will be the Sammamish Police Department, supported by Public Works and EOC staff, East Side Fire and Rescue, and Washington State Patrol when needed. The plan will be activated when threat is detected, when warning is available. The threat is assessed to determine the needs for the Emergency Operations Center, where the lead agencies with EOC staff coordination will determine the need to issue an evacuation notice. Again, incident-specific factors and hazards will impact planning strategies. The study noted specifically that the city's hazard profile indicates that the city is more likely to face impact without warning. So some factors that this will impact during planning and evacuation include resource availability, likely damage to transportation networks, which can limit evacuation routes. Power or communication networks may not function, or personnel may not be able to access the area, to name a few impacts. There are also population-specific characteristics that are affected by the incident that need to be evaluated. Will they need transportation support? What egress does their neighborhood provide? Are transportation resources available and able to get to the area? And these are areas that will require flexibility and problem solving during decision making. In an ideal setting, the city will have warning before an incident, which will allow time for identifying the risk areas in the population. Some considerations would include, will the population need additional evacuation time? Does the area have limited neighborhood egress? Are there populations that will need assistance or transportation to evacuate? And is the at-risk area in one emergency management zone or multiple? Additional considerations include where people are in their weekly activities. Are they at school and work, or are they at home together? And hazard-specific details, is there enough time to evacuate, or is evacuating unsafe compared to sheltering at home? The study survey provided insight into population characteristics, which help with the planning efforts. On average, 10 to 15% of evacuees go to public shelters, and the majority of households will have pets. So finding shelters that make these accommodation is really important. Many households will also wait until their family members arrive home before evacuating, and most will use personal vehicles. I'd like to note that the study estimates account for families evacuating with one vehicle per household, but most households will evacuate with all vehicles, and the city on average has 2 vehicles per household. So this will impact area evacuation times. So maybe a recommendation there could be communicating the importance of limiting what is towed with you. Of course, that's up to the citizen's choice, as always. Also, most guardians will pick up their children from school. So it would be beneficial to coordinate with the school districts if an evacuation is necessary while school is in session, and to provide traffic control to increase the time that guardians can get their children quickly and prepare to evacuate. Preparation time to evacuate has the biggest effect on when an area is completely cleared. So increasing those notification times would help clear the area faster. And the population outside of the evacuation area may voluntarily evacuate, which will increase traffic. And an estimated 2% of the population will need transportation assistance to evacuate. So the map here shows your 6 emergency management zones in the city, as mentioned earlier. The green highlighted routes are the recommended evacuation routes. And of course, that will be incident specific. The study determined that most incidents based on the city's hazard profile will require multiple emergency management zones to evacuate at once. Of course, the geography of the area can limit evacuation options as well. For example, heavily forested areas may drive evacuation routes one direction and limit evacuation pathways. So when evacuation routes are limited to one direction, it increases that amount of time it takes to evacuate everyone. So it's recommended to, when possible, go both north and southbound when evacuating to reduce the time it takes to clear the area. The study also identified access impaired neighborhoods. These have a high wildfire risk, high population density, and a limited means of egress out of the neighborhood. When these areas need to evacuate, they will need to be notified as early as possible to provide enough time to leave the area. The study suggested potential safe refuge areas for most of the neighborhoods in the event of an impending wildfire, which you can see listed here. And also on this map, you can see the areas highlighted in orange are the high-risk areas. Here you'll see a map of a transportation pickup route for populations that are not able to travel in a private car. Transportation services should be initiated after schools and critical care facilities are evacuated, which will also give people time to prepare to evacuate. The study found that most people will take within 2 to 3 hours to prepare to evacuate and suggests initiating bus services for public transportation around that time. That would mean that more people would be available at these bus stops to utilize the bus services after they prepare for evacuation. Mutual aid agreements with the county and school districts can support transportation efforts, but backup resources are always advised. Based on the information provided by the study, a few strategies were emphasized in the plan. Increase activation and notification times as much as possible. The amount of time between receiving the evacuation notice and actually evacuating increases the time an area can be completely evacuated. So the sooner the population knows to evacuate, the more quickly they can prepare and then leave the area, and that will increase your clearance times. Additional time should be considered when school is in session, since guardians will go to the schools to pick up their children. The study indicates that it's faster to let schools handle evacuating children to shelters where family reunification can take place. But human behavior is a big factor here, and the study survey found most guardians will go to the school and evacuate as a household. So coordinating with the school and including their emergency plans in advance is beneficial. The public should be informed as to where they can find updated information during an emergency, such as incident-specific evacuation routes or changes to routes. Transportation pickup point information should also be provided to the public in advance and clearly marked at their locations. And lastly, return action plans will be activated when it is deemed safe to return, and it should be phased and scheduled to reduce traffic congestion returning to the city. Public messaging will be key in providing a concise reentry schedule. Any necessary documentation should be noted, as well as specific routes for reentry, any restricted areas, and the location of support services. And that concludes my portion of this.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Howe?
I have just a couple of questions. First has to do just with the technical issue. For reverse 911, do you have to sign up for that, or is that an automatic process that can be designated by a jurisdiction?
I would have to look into the answer of that. I know that citizens can sign up for notifications through county and city services.
Right.
I'm not sure about reverse 911 specifically.
But I think reverse 911 could actually be jurisdiction level. But I'm not positive about that, but I'd love to know.
Yeah, we can follow up on that,
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Howe. I believe we've used it in the past for targeted neighborhoods.
Right.
I believe it can get down to that granular level, so that's a follow-up item we'll be working on.
Okay, great. And the other question has to do with the 10% of the population that would have to go to a shelter. And as you're aware, we don't have shelters here that are 24-hour because we don't have staffing for that. Well, that's not the only reason, but that's a reason. And so what I would be interested in seeing too is, and it wouldn't be in this plan, but it would be in an additional plan for 24-hour sheltering, which King County has not solved. So I'm not suggesting that this is, that we could point to a county that's going to save us in this instance. They don't have a plan for this. And the best plan that they've been able to offer has been actually through the use of trained volunteers and using church-based properties as a potential housing, because we can't use necessarily city-owned property, and we will not have access to city staff. So what I'm interested in is the seed of a plan for how we can look at 24-hour sheltering. I actually have a document I can share that was created by somebody from King County who actually works in emergency management and did this for Katrina when he was working for Red Cross. So happy to share that information, but is there a place for the 24-hour shelter
And
in
just
this plan?
I'll quickly follow up on that. In a parallel piece of work, there is another entity looking at the whole topic of sheltering. We're using an emergency management performance grant to have somebody take a look at all of our situation, including our staffing, locations, and everything, and to come up with some recommendations, whether it be partnership agreements, plans similar to what you suggested, and then we have matching funds set aside to operationalize those recommendations. That work has started. We're about a month into it, and I would expect that you would get a similar presentation on its results probably very early in September.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Treen. And Mark, do you still have another presentation?
Yes, but it's fairly quick.
Okay. Because, yeah, Councilmember Treen.
Barriers. So the only question I have, Mark, for you is on the barriers, if those were taken into consideration when calculating the evacuation times, especially for like a community like Trossachs.
They were. The consultant firm that did the evacuation study looked at those. I will need to look up the exact component for you out of the study, but I believe their conclusion was that removing those did not appreciably change the timing, that it really had to do more with the actual, exits out of the city. But they did take a look at those, and there is some language in the larger report on it, and I'll happily hunt it up for you and let you know where it's at.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, I'm not seeing anything yet. Mark, if you want to go ahead.
Kelly, if you want to unshare, I will give it a whirl. All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah, you're good, Mark.
Okay, thanks. So quickly, this is just the background. Again, it just said what ACDC did. I won't continue on with it, and I'll move on to the quick topics. As ACDC's assessment recommended, there were some operational procedure, technical integration, training and exercises, also community engagement, and importantly, collaboration with emergency management regional partners. So now that we have the assessment recommendations, in 2024, as I mentioned earlier, we have designated an emergency management coordinator. That's the supervising management analyst, Lacey Lewis, who's going to assist in helping us put together not only the overall program, but the ongoing monitoring, planning, and exercising of the components. We're going to continue networking with our area emergency managers, most notably King County Emergency Management and our Eastside Fire and Rescue Emergency Management partners, along with those from Issaquah. And we are working to contact and begin that relationship with some of the utilities. As I mentioned earlier, we will do a bit of a refresh on the Emergency Management Committee. It's a committee that needs to exist, and it helps advise on some of these issues and provide some guiding information. And it's also a good way to keep some of the important staff engaged in the topic. We're working with our communications manager to prepare a communications plan. Similarly to what you heard Kelly talk about near the end of the presentation, where we have some good information and it's readily available. The communications plan will be that strategy, as she suggested, where we send out topical information to make people aware of preparation plans or where they can find other information, sign up to get notifications and information and things of that sort. We're taking a look at our training needs. I have worked with King County Emergency Management, and they have put together a training plan, a good basic training plan for a city our size for both the emergency management coordinator and for those that staff an EOC and those staff that would respond to any emergent situation. And we will begin going through that training and assessing who needs what training as we move through 2024. We will also begin to work on an emergency management strategic plan. This is slightly different from the comprehensive emergency management plan in that it sets schedules and sets up kind of the administrative part of it, where we track the plans that need to be regularly updated, where we keep up with our communications, where we assess and monitor people's training and things of that sort. The result of this is that within the biennial budget, I believe one of the council members asked about this earlier, there's likely to be a request for some emergency management resources in order to do this. Additionally, the fiscal year 2024 Emergency Management Performance Grant, or EMPG, it just came out, and it may make some sense and it may fit the criteria to apply for another EMPG for this upcoming year to help us operationalize some of these items. Going forward into 2025, we're going to continue our community engagement through the communications plan. We're going to continue with our additional partnership engagements to include some work with some exercises. We'll do the year 2 training, and we'll have another emergency operations center exercise, again, geared towards getting people who will be working or staffing in that environment, whether it's online or in person, comfortable with the roles that they have to play. And there will be some 2025 work plan items that come from this as well. The emergency management strategic plan, the review of documents, plans, and training, and the possibility of using that EMPG for some consultant support to do some components of this work, similarly to what we're doing with the sheltering work. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Great, thank you, Mark. Councilmember Lamb.
So I see the list. I'm not clear, is an evacuation plan part of the emergency strategic plan? Will there be an evacuation plan done?
Yeah, the evacuation plan is the evacuation annex. If you mean in terms of like a specific, we're evacuating from over here, and so here's the roads and routes to take. That is so specific to what you might encounter. That's best done through exercises or tabletops when you can set up some of those assumptions and then plan some of that. The evacuation annex is the evacuation component of the comprehensive emergency management plan.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand, if I was a resident, would I know how to get out? Like, would I know, okay, I live in this area, these are the routes that you should take, and would there be communication to, ideally take one car, have water, have food with you? Like, I'm just trying to understand, I guess I'm just not clear, is what will be done?
Some of these sort of dovetail onto each other. So the communications plan would be sending out information about planning ahead, having those things available. It would be a general message about if you're told to get ready, then get ready, and when you're told to go, go. Because, as the study and the plan point out, there are so many different variables on directions of travel, what the reason for the evacuation is. There isn't a set, I live here, so I evacuate this way, because you might not be able to go that way. And people need to listen at the time of an emergency to know which direction to go.
Okay. I guess there's a lot of, questions, in the air. I guess I'm not I'm not satisfied that I would know what to do. And if I'm feeling the same way, I think that other people might as well. It just seems sort of abstract.
Councilmember.
Yeah, and by no means am I suggesting that we're finished with this topic. We just got back the work that Kelly did, and she's presenting the findings. Now we need to take that along with the other partners that play key roles, like the police department, public works, entities around us, to begin to put that together, to use that communications plan that's being put together to share the information. So this is really the first step.
Okay. Are there neighboring
not
cities?
the end.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Are there neighboring cities
No,
that have done something similar to what I'm envisioning?
There's a evacuation component to everybody's comprehensive emergency management plan. I think you'll find they're similar in nature, because again, it's difficult to tell what part of a city may need to be evacuated in what direction for what type of an event. And so there are a number of variables that come into play. And so it's hard to have like the plan for an event cast in stone. And that's why the communications component and the coordination is so important.
Mark, if I may, Councilmember Lamb, I appreciate what you're saying, and I think the challenge is that emergency management planning is esoteric in and of itself, because we're trying to anticipate something that might happen in the future that may or may not happen. Keep in mind that the bulk of what you would consider to be emergencies tend to be intra-Sammamish, in that we solve them ourselves and nobody needs to leave. And so in thinking about the broader regional piece, we are, as you all know, part of a broader part of the region. And to Mark's point, in all likelihood, it won't be something where the entire city is evacuating out all at once. It will be something going on. It's probably more likely if you take the example of a wildfire, where it might be in one neighborhood and we might be sharing out information to say, if you're in this part of the neighborhood, you go this way. If you're in another part of the neighborhood, you go the other way. And part of the planning and the operationalizing on the internal side is being able to clearly communicate out when there is an emergency with specific directions about how it's going to work. And I think that's the challenging part, and I totally understand. That's why the bulk of what you see in terms of communication and available information is broken down into the, I think it used to be the 3 days, 3 ways. I'm blanking on what it's called now, but being prepared yourself about how you're going to take care of yourself and your family, and the rest of those components are at the time of the event, that communication is coming out saying what's happening, where to go, and how it's going to work. And we don't know those ahead of time. That's in part why Mark was referring to the tabletop exercises, are to try to work through those. We intend on internally spooling up our EOC to practice, so that when we come to those bigger emergencies, we are prepared. And I think, as Mark was pointing out, we've had enough staff turnover since Councilmember Trina was talking about 2020, that none of the leadership team is the same as it was in 2020. And so a lot of that training did not carry over. And so we have some work to do, and we know that. But I think we are overall in pretty good shape. Our CEMP is certified by the state. It now has the evacuation component with it, where we understand where the routes are. And so in those times, we are then able to, as the EOC, and I am told, and I think this is true, that I am the EOC incident commander always, but I may not be the operational commander. So in those moments that, as information comes in, we are pushing out information to those that need it, to say, for instance, if a school has to be evacuated, that the pickup point for parents is going to be somewhere else. Don't go to the school, as an example. But again, all of those are very situationally specific, and we can't put that kind of information out there because it won't always be true. So all of this is to have us prepared so that we can communicate out clearly. That's part of the big part of the communication plan. It's partly reminding people to be prepared, But if we did it every week like we discussed, everyone would just tune it out. So we're trying to be strategic about when we remind folks it's ahead of those times of year where we know things are going to happen, like heat and water safety this time of year in the summer. In the fall, it would be storm preparedness for power outages, down trees, that kind of stuff. In the winter, it's preparing for snow and again, potential power outages. And in the meantime, that we are prepared and we know how to spool up, communicate out, and let everybody know what's supposed to happen. So the plan really is, it is external. The CEMP is on our webpage, but for the most part, my sense is that residents want to be told when the time comes what's happening, where to go, and how is it supposed to work. So that they can just follow those directions and we're not having people trying to go at cross purposes to where we need them to go. That part about the zones, and Councilmember Trina, I appreciate the questions about evacuation. It turns out that as the study found out, everyone's going to take all their cars because they want to protect their family and their property as much as possible. If we could get everyone to dump all their cars and all climb into one, we could probably evacuate the city faster, but that's not human nature. And so we are trying to prepare for human nature and people understandably wanting to go get their kid from the school rather than having the school move their kid somewhere else. So those are all parts of the pieces of trying to plan ahead for that, recognizing it and accommodating that as much as possible so that we can make sure everybody is safe and gets out. So I understand where you're coming from, and I think the answer really is there's not going to be that very clear, delineated, you do this when this happens, you do that when that happens. It's going to be at that time, and I'll use an example when a couple of years ago when the BPA power lines went down, they got dropped and closed down on a very hot summer day, Issaquah Falls City Road for an extended time period. And in that time, we weren't as prepared as we should have been to communicate out to residents, to tell them to detour and tell them how to go about doing that. We are much better prepared to do that today than we were back then. And so that's part of doing our work and operationalizing that internally and with our partners, and including, and Mark mentioned some of them, but like our water sewer districts. I think we have to remember and recognize that the city is not our main utility provider for any of our utilities. We are reliant on partners, public and private, to provide those utilities. And so our role is to try to communicate, make sure people are safe, have a place to go, and understand what's happening in those moments. And that's what the plan and the associated follow-up work is designed to do. And then for our staff to know who's supposed to be doing what and how it's supposed to work so that we're all on the same page.
Thanks, Scott, for that explanation. That's super helpful. Thanks.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thanks, Mark and Kelly and Scott. I think what, just kind of building on what Councilmember Lamb was asking, what might be helpful, Scott, is as you guys go through one of these exercises, and I used to, I had a rotation at Microsoft doing this very thing, because we do that. We plan, our example was that a plane crashed into our building, right? And so what are we going to do? Because we were the security response team. So what might be helpful is if we could just, once you guys start doing that, is to maybe share an example with us of what that looks like so that we can get a better grasp of what that would be like. Because I get it, like we don't know which way to tell people to evacuate because it really depends on what is the emergency, where exactly is it, all of those types, how much of the city is evacuating, those types of things. But I think if we could see an example of what that will look like as you guys start to go through that. And then another potential idea is, I agree, we don't want to over communicate this because we don't want people to become numb to it, but kind of like we put information in our monthly newsletter around, things that people can do to be more sustainable. It might be interesting, since our newsletter comes out, is to have just little tips and tricks, like you said, kind of seasonally, and reinforce it there for people, and really start to provide information like, hey, if there is a big emergency and we do need to evacuate, it's best if you take as few vehicles as possible because we can cut the evacuation time, by 75% if everybody takes one car instead of four, right? Those types of things. So I think there are things like that that we can do as you guys develop those communications plans. But I would love to just see an example, where you do one of those situations. And I do think, I'm assuming that we will also have to try to identify primary, like Kelly did on that one slide, what are the primary evacuation routes, and what, if anything, does the city need to do to make those evacuation routes more effective or more efficient today when there isn't an emergency, and then if there is an emergency, what actually will we do? Like, will we turn 228th all into one direction if we're trying to evacuate, those types of things? And I think those are important. Having lived in the Washington, D.C. area on 9/11, those types of plans weren't in place. And when the entire city of Washington, D.C. and some of the surrounding suburbs were all evacuated, there was a bit of chaos because the roadways could not handle that kind of traffic all at once, and they did, on the fly, start to turn some of those roads one way outward. But because there hadn't been any prior communication, no one was prepared for that, and it wasn't as effective as it could have been. So I think some of those things could be very helpful.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Howe?
Just quickly, the other part of this too, Mark, is that council members need to be trained. So I'm on EMAC, as you know, and we are actually building training for elected officials. Our main job, of course, is to stay out of your way. And that's critical, and we know that. But we also have a deck that we're working on to help elected officials understand the role that we play in an emergency and what we don't do, so that we can stay out of the way as appropriate. And we've got a draft. We could add a tabletop into that. So I'll share the draft with you, and we should be done in the next month or so.
That would be great. Thank you. King County Emergency Management also put together, I think it's a series of 3 pretty short, here's what you do as an elected official as part of an emergency or an EOC
the videos.
as well. Yep, and that's part of the training plan that is going to be coming to you.
All right, Council, anything else for Mark or Kelly? Great. Well, thank you, Mark. I know you'll be coming back, obviously, probably before the end of the year, I assume, maybe with an update or something. Awesome.
Yes, and the sheltering work will be coming in the fall as well.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Mark. All right. So let's get to public hearings. First is the maybe end of public hearing 2025 to 2030 Transportation Improvement Plan. We'll start with public comment on the hearing, then go to council discussion, and then I will close the hearing. Audrey, did you want to do a presentation first, or Greg?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We do have a very brief presentation, and then we'll hand it back to you if that works.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I am joined this evening by Greg Sabatiu, our Public Works Deputy Director, and Lindsay Channing, our Transportation Planner with the city. And of course, I'm Audrey Sarcy, the Public Works Director. Very happy to bring the tip back to you for consideration for adoption this evening. We do have, like I said, a handful of slides. You'll find in your packet several attachments. Exhibit 1 is the authorizing resolution for the 2025 through 2030 Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP. Exhibit 2 is the first component of our TIP, which is a spreadsheet. I believe that begins on packets page 211. The second component of our TIP is a guide. That guide describes each program and project within the TIP itself in a little bit more detail, and that is Exhibit 3 and starts on agenda packet page 212. We have received great feedback, so we appreciate everyone that has provided us with questions, comments, and feedback over the last few weeks, and we have compiled our staff responses to those in a question and answer section of the agenda packet, which can be found as Exhibit 4, starting on page 250 of your packets this evening. Like I said, we do have a few things we'll go through, and then we'll hand it back to you, Mayor. Next slide, please. I did want to call your attention to all of the really great work that we have planned for, that is in progress this year and is planned for 2025. We did receive quite a few comments and inquiries about why certain programs didn't have more funding. If you could thank you, more funding to them, and how the tip may change in future years. As you can tell by the slide, we have a lot of really great work that we are planning to complete in 2025. So we do anticipate those future tips would be influenced by all of this great planning work that we are embarking on. This year, we are working on our TMP that will accompany the comprehensive plan update. We're also working on our town center supplemental EIS, or environmental impact statement. And we are planning on already a TMP update in 2025. We will be, Public Works staff will be presenting an introduction to our Transportation Master Plan, our TMP, at the July 2nd council meeting, and then we will provide the draft plan and discuss that with council in public hearings in June and August this year. So a lot of important dates there, and we'll follow up in future meetings with all of those dates. And again, we have other work that we're planning on in 2025, the Bike and Pedestrian Mobility Strategic Plan, and we'll take a deep dive into our different levels of transportation modes. We anticipate that the project list from that plan will be infused in our future TIP as well as our TMP. And same thing with our Pavement Management Strategic Plan and our TIF update. Our traffic impact fee update will be a separate effort, but of course we'll incorporate all of the project lists so we can adjust our impact fees accordingly. Next slide, please. Actually going to hand it over to Lindsay to summarize some of the comments that we heard from the community.
Great, thank you, Audrey. Council, as of today, we received 9 written comments from the community. All of those, it's my understanding, have been forwarded to council by our clerk's office. Staff did put together a question and answer document that Audrey alluded to a little bit earlier in this presentation. It addressed all of the written comments that we received and all of the verbal questions that we heard at the last meeting that we were before council and when the public hearing was first opened, so on June 4th. As mentioned, the question and answer document is attached as Exhibit 4. It was also published on our Transportation Improvement Plan webpage on the city's website last Thursday. It's 12 pages of question and answer. We had some really great questions that we were really excited that we were able to elaborate on to hopefully help the community understand better the purpose of our TIP and the projects and programs that we have. Some of the main questions and themes that we heard included questions around pedestrian connectivity, different funding mechanisms, how concurrency and traffic counts played into our projects, our transit enhancement program questions, questions around our corridor projects, and then also requests for some new projects. Out of all of the questions that we received, staff is not recommending that there be any additional funding or additional projects added to this year's TIP. As Audrey just went over, we have a lot more planning work that we're planning on doing towards the end of 2024 into 2025 that we think will give us a lot better understanding and answers that will allow us to make modifications to our TIP next year. It is a 6-year plan, but it is looked at on an annual basis. So we have that flexibility to be able to be a little more precise and understand where we need to go next year. Also, I want to point out that staff noticed a few Scrivener errors, and we also were notified by a couple council members of a couple Scrivener errors as well that were found in the TIP spreadsheet and the TIP guide, program and project guide. We outlined those errors in the staff report in detail, and all of those have been corrected on the attachments and exhibits that were with the staff report this evening. So once council approves our 2025-2030 TIP, we will be transmitting that document to Washington State Department of Transportation by the deadline of July 1st. And with that, staff does recommend that council conduct and close the continued public hearing this evening. And then we have provided a recommended motion to approve the 2025-2030 TIP via resolution as presented by staff. This concludes our presentation this evening. We're happy to take any questions that you have, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can see each other.
Great, thank you. All right, Let's start with public comment. Do we have anybody that signed up for this one specifically, the tip? Lindsay and Audrey, you were coordinated. Greg, you missed it. Okay. Raylene?
My name is Raylene Canby, and I live in Sammamish. And I want to address the 42nd Street barricade. I don't know if that is included in the current TIP plan. All of the current council members have received personal tours of the 42nd Street barricade and its safety issues, and safety is our #1 concern of the neighborhoods of Hidden Ridge, Waterbrook, Timberline, and Timberline Park. And we just wanted to remind you that all of these neighborhoods in their HOAs annual meeting has 100% agreed that we want the barricade to remain closed. And we would also request that it remain off the TIP, not even under consideration. And as I said, I don't know if that particular barricade is included in the TIP. Our neighborhoods have absolutely no objection to emergency opening of the barricade, and the fire department, police, and ambulance all have clickers like you use on your garage to open it in case of emergency. And that's basically all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Syed?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I am here for one comment about the TIP and 2 questions. Comment about TIP, I want to compliment the Public Works, Audrey, Lindsay, Greg, and her team in not only preparing the TIP, but also spending quite a substantial amount of time. And as Lindsay alluded to it, I counted 52 questions that they have to respond to it and the comments, and I appreciate them to go over all those questions and respond to it. So I want to kind of compliment and appreciate the work that the Public Works has done. This is my comment. Question, I was wondering that since we know that we don't have enough funding to do all the TIP projects, has there been any discussion at the council level to look at other possible funding such as initiatives, such as transportation levies or a special district? Has there been any discussion exploring that and see if there is an appetite from the community to look into that kind of source? And let me tell you why. Because we know that we're dealing with the city. Our city doesn't have that much of power as far as getting that regional fund, because most of the regional fund coming from the state or the federal goes to the bigger projects that go through, they called it roadway with significant, regional significant impact, and we don't have that. So we don't have that much power to gain enough funding on that. So I was wondering if there has been any discussion or if there is any desire that the council look into possible initiative and levies and all that. This is question number 1. Question number 2 was not original, but since I heard about the emergency preparedness and the funding, has there been any discussion, and I believe I discussed it 2 years ago at the council too, has there been any discussion with the FEMA? There is some funding and some opportunities that we may be able to tap into it and ask FEMA for designation of the Sahali 228 as an emergency evacuation route, and tap into some funding sources for some transportation improvement, and use the argument that this is the main corridor in the city, and that would help us as far as addressing the emergency evacuation. And I don't know if that is something that staff has looked into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, did we have anyone sign up for this one? Great.
Per the new reasonable accommodation, those who have pre-registered by 3 o'clock today, please raise your hand if you wish to give testimony.
Where's Paul? Okay. Just making sure. All righty. I'm going to open up to council for questions or discussion. Councilmember Lamb?
Can you go ahead and close the public hearing?
I'm going to do the discussion first, then I'm going to close it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
On last year's tip for the corridor studies, there was future dollars. There was a column for future dollars, and it's not in this one. Is it because we just don't know what the projects are, coming out of the studies that the dollar amounts were removed?
You're exactly right, Councilmember. Yeah, we are looking at the corridor studies, and we're not sure yet of the preferred alternative, and then of course a phasing plan and the project costs that may go with all of those things.
Okay. And last time you guys were here, I was again saying that the dollar amounts for sidewalks at 200,000 was not enough, and I was suggesting that we double it to 400. And I'd really like to vote and approve this year's tip, but this one item is kind of a problem for me. And I'm not quite sure where those dollars can be pulled from.
Just to provide some additional context, we do anticipate that funding allocation for that program, as shown in the TIP, and of course the actual funding allocation piece of it would go along with the budget process, but the amount shown in the TIP we anticipate will likely increase as we work on and complete our bike and pedestrian mobility plan next year. So staff is recommending funding as is currently, so that we can complete a few in-process projects, and then we'll have a longer list and likely ask for additional funding as we work on the TIP next year for future years. So just as a consideration there, we also have a series of projects throughout the TIP, and almost every project in our TIP does include sidewalks. So there we are putting in more sidewalk than it appears that if we're just looking outside the sidewalk program lens, those are just those small, very small projects that we can get out the door fairly quickly. But all of our other projects, I think, do have sidewalk component to them.
Yeah, they do all have sidewalks, but the list, I think we mentioned, there was 12 of them, and at $3.4 million, it would take 17 years to get through that list, and that list doesn't include like the Inglewood and the other ones. So again, I just don't think 200,000 is enough. And when you say, when we look at the mobility plan, and you would like, how much money are you saying that would come out of that one?
Scott has.
Oh.
No, go ahead, Audrey. Answer that question, and then I'll circle back.
We're not quite sure yet because of the mobility plan needs to be completed first, right? And so we're hoping that as we look at a citywide need of where our sidewalks should be going across the city, and we're moving towards multimodal level of service. So it's sidewalks and potentially bike lanes, maybe it's a shared use path, but we want to identify that need across the city and then prioritize all of those needs. The result may be a larger sidewalk program that has a larger dollar amount to it, and maybe even larger projects, but we just want to go about that very carefully so that we are putting in improvements in the right spot and at the right time and the right improvement for that spot. So that's why staff's recommending the funding amount for this year's TIP, but really with the focus on 2025 for that program.
As a follow-up, Councilmember, I think one of the things the challenges that we have right at the moment is that any added dollars that go into the CIP are coming out of the general fund, and so it's at this moment we haven't seen the rest of the budget, and so these are year-over-year dollars, and so the team has allocated based on, at my direction, about what they've traditionally had, and as we go through our broad, we're going to be talking about our CIP overall, and then how we fund all that stuff. all of that will be rolled in. If council so chooses in the budget process, just because the TIP says 200, council could always choose to boost that amount. And vice versa, if council chooses today to increase that amount, that's your prerogative, and we will work with that as we move forward. So I think, to Audrey's point, we are aiming to get us through 2025, get projects completed off that smaller sidewalk program is for the smaller pieces. And then once we have the strategic plan, if you will, the bike and the PED plan, that we would have a better sense of where those projects are, how many of them are, and then we would also have the discussion about how do we fund that program moving forward. Because again, it's all the same dollars. It turns out we're trying to do a whole bunch of stuff with the same dollars. And at some point, there is it's a bit of a zero-sum game at some point. So.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, thank you. So just following up on that point, I appreciate we're sort of in a which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of situation. But if I understand this correctly, this is supposed to be a planning document. It's not the budget document, but it will be the document that helps us to inform the budget. And so by planning for a number that we know is going to be way too low, because I think we can all agree that $200,000 a year isn't going to get us much of anything in terms of the sidewalks. I personally would agree with Councilmember Lamb. I would rather see us plan for something more reasonable here, and then in the budget process, we can decide, yes, we have the budget to do that, or no, we're going to have to scale that back. But if we go in with this lower number, we're not likely to add more money in our budget process, because we're not going to have a line item in our budget that we look at when we approve the budget that's at this granular level, right? We're going to be looking at more of a total number, right, for transportation. Isn't that correct?
Somewhat, Councilmember, but also when you look at the CIPs, you will have this level of, you'll see these as part of the broad part of the CIP when we bring the different, sorry, not CIPs, excuse me, the Transportation Capital Fund. When we come there, it will have this it will have the granular level. I appreciate your point, though, and again, if that's council's desire at this point to pre-designate how much you want to put in there, obviously the staff will work with that, and we'll come back with what that looks like. So again, you've got our collective recommendation based on the dollars that we know are available. And if you want to change that, that's, again, council, we will pivot at council's direction.
Awesome. And then based on that dollars that we know are available, is there any, I know that some of the additional funding is listed in the program guide. For me personally, it would be really helpful if we could get that other funding on the spreadsheet, because it's really hard to kind of go back and forth and see, like, so this program is funded, but it's partially funded by the 340 program, and it's also partially funded by something else. It would be really awesome, even if you just had an other column and you put the dollar amount, and then we could see in the program guide, where is that coming from? Is that coming from a grant or something else? Just so we know that there is other funding for that all in one place. And then is there any way to have a marking on here which ones are TIF eligible? I know, again, when I asked the question, you answered it in the question, but it's like a list of like 5 or 6 projects, and it's really hard, again, to know which ones are those, because as we go through and look at things and we're going to make decisions, those are all factors that come in. And so for me, at least, it's helpful to have it all in one place. Would that be possible?
You're doing a great job of foreshadowing the citywide CIP conversation that we're going to have, but we can probably find you those pieces of information right now. I think those should be fairly readily available.
Yeah, I mean, the answers are in the FAQs, right, the answers, but it's just really hard to kind of have to do that cross-referencing. So having that on there would be super awesome. And then kind of in the same vein with the questions about the sidewalk, for the neighborhood traffic management program and the school zone management program, we talked about those as well. Those are currently just $15,000 each. I don't mean this to be what we call it at work, a rude Q&A, but honestly, what can we get for $15,000?
So those were set at funding levels based off staff recommendation and based on averages for the last few years as well. So
Right, but like, just give me an example. Like, can we even get a crosswalk for 15,000? Can you get a flashing light? Like, what are a couple of things that you can actually? Because I'm just worried that like $15,000 gets me like 4 stripes on a crosswalk and not a whole crosswalk.
We it certainly can pay for thermo for a crosswalk and some study work as well. Those dollars were also set aside to upgrade some of our flashing zones or flashers in front of the schools as well. So if we are completely upgrading those, then they live in the 340 fund and on the tip. If it's a general maintenance item, it typically comes out of the transportation budget, right, in our operating fund. So we have identified some locations where we'll likely be upgrading some of our locations. That program again could expand, but it's likely that pedestrian improvements in terms of sidewalks near schools would likely lie with one of our bigger projects, a corridor project, and kind of be wrapped into some of those larger projects. So this particular program is just kind of smaller improvements.
So how much does generally a crosswalk cost, just out of curiosity?
Oh gosh, if it's just the striping, it's not very expensive. We do most of the analysis in-house. If it's a raised crosswalk or has different flashers in front of it and beacons in front of it, that's a different cost. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we did meet with our traffic engineering team when determining the funding amount to go into that program. So this is based
I'm just trying to get a sense, right? Like, is that like one raised crosswalk a year? Like, I don't know, right? And not having that kind of context makes it hard to know. Is that really, like, is that really what we're looking at? Is that for the neighborhood traffic program and the school zone program, we're really talking about just one thing a year at $15,000 each? Because I understand that it's a zero-sum game, but at the same time, like, if that's all we're talking about is like a crosswalk a year, I don't think that's even remotely adequate, right, for this type of what we need across the city. And I just want to I'd rather have the sense that says, hey, the bill is really, really big, and that's what we have to go tackle, as opposed to thinking that $15,000 a year would be adequate, and then that's all we plan for in our budgeting process, especially if we look at something like going out and doing some sort of a capital improvement bond. I would hate for us to go get a bond and it not be enough to cover what we really need.
If I may, council members, some of the improvements around school zones, like I said, will likely be improved through projects in other areas of our TIP. So this particular program was created with the intent of upgrading some of our existing infrastructure, or like I said, installing some very specific infrastructure. The traffic engineering team works very closely with the police department and all the schools in the city, and this was the amount that they recommended for that program. Of course, it's council's discretion as to how much that program is funded. And then a little bit on the neighborhood traffic management program. That was a program that I believe came out of a recommendation from our areas included in our comprehensive plan. It's a great program. We have made some really great improvements to that program in the past. It is typically initiated through a community request for improvements for a particular neighborhood. It was the traffic engineering team's recommendation to reduce the funding for that program, as we haven't had as many requests come in the last few years for that program. And typically the staff evaluation piece of it takes about 6 to 8 months, if not almost a year, depending on the type of request, to work through all of their analysis and funding. So we currently don't have any requests in the queue right now. So that's why the funding amount was reduced in the first year or so for that program. And we could consider additional funding for that program should we have more requests that come in the next year or two.
Okay, thanks. And then I know I had asked if we could list even all the studies on here, and the answer was no, they're somewhere else. But I thought we had to have things on here to be grant eligible. So is there a situation where we might not be able to get a grant because we didn't put it on here?
Not necessarily with our projects that are planned right now. Some of the studies are actually were precursors to areas that we thought were maybe concurrency failures, and they are no longer failures based on our data. So we are still going to continue to study and observe the intersection, but as we assess those numbers over the years and should conditions change, of course, they may be added back to the TIP if we have new forecasted failures. So, and it was a great comment that we did hear your comment. It was a great feedback to have all of the information in one place. So we will be working on updating our transportation planning webpage so that it's kind of a one-stop shop for all of our transportation and traffic plans that are happening, so that it's hopefully a great resource for the community and council going forward.
So there's no point in time that by not having it on the TIP, we wouldn't, because I thought that's really kind of the purpose of the TIP, is to make sure that we are grant eligible. So if we have a specific study, because in the answers, you gave a list of studies that we're currently working on, but they're not all listed on the TIP. So it's my understanding that there are grants available for studies, especially ones that are sort of a cross-section of transportation and sustainability or other things, that they would potentially be there are grants available for things like that. So I'm just wondering, is there any harm in listing those studies, just having a section that says studies on the TIP, so that we're sure we don't miss out on grants?
So, Councilmember, I appreciate what you're saying. I think overall, my experience has been that you have to try to prioritize what you might go after in grants. And so that's part of what you're seeing with the TIP, is these are the projects that have scored highest and that we would be trying to go after grants if they are available. The other part of my experience over time is that there are fewer and fewer grants available, and they are more and more competitive. And they're harder and harder to get. And so one of the things that is helpful for a city to be focused in what they're trying to do and what they're going after. And so in part, when we list everything that we've got, then it also says that we're not prioritizing any of those pieces, and that's in part why council appropriately set criteria for how projects make it onto the TIP and get funded. That's part of that scoring criteria, is partly why you're seeing the projects that have risen to the top and excuse me, warrant funding. And then if there are grants available for those, great. And so this helps us be organized and helps us be competitive when we try to go after grants.
Okay, I wasn't asking for new studies. I was asking for the studies we're currently working on to be on the TIP. That's all. But it's okay. It's still not going to all be in one place. And I hear you. The answer is no. We're not making any changes. But I don't understand what the downside would be of putting the studies that we're currently working on the TIP. It's not a lack of focus. We're already potentially working on them or planning to work on them. So they're not like pipe dream studies. They're actual studies that we're planning to do, right?
I can expand a little bit. We do have numerous studies on the TIP that we anticipate will help us to determine the outcome of a capital project. Some of those are the corridor studies, right, which result in a plan and then a project phasing plan for that corridor, and then capital improvement projects. The studies that were not included were fairly small in cost and operational studies that the traffic team is working on. And at this time, we don't believe it would lead to a capital improvement project. So that's why they have not been included on the TIP. All of our larger projects or larger studies that are directly associated with a capital project that has been prioritized and we believe would be a great funding opportunity, they're all listed on the TIP.
Thanks.
Councilmember Gupta.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for your response to my questions. I agree with the comments about the funding for the sidewalk plan, but I also understand the challenge of having the bike ped plan initiated and finished next year, so we don't really know what that funding allocation would look like. Coming at this as a budget novice, this is my first time tackling it. I just want to make sure that, because this document is informing our budget decisions coming up later this year, certainly I would like to see a greater allocation. It doesn't necessarily have to be reflected in the tip. I understand council can, when we make those budget decisions, we can just decide that we want greater allocation regardless of what the tip says. But I just want to make sure that in 25, once the bike ped plan is completed or at least in process, and we have a better idea of the project list and consequently what the funding levels or the funding asks might be, that in the mid-buy we have a chance to potentially significantly or at least meaningfully increase the funding allocation there, because again, this is my first time doing it. I don't want to be in a position in the end of 25 when we're looking at the mid-buy update and saying, well, really, we shouldn't be putting a ton of money into this program now that we have the project list. What we should be doing is waiting for 26, 27. And if we wanted funding for this project for implementation of the bike ped plan and the transit plan implementation, we really should have taken a look at that in the budget plan for 25, 26. So I guess I'm looking for reassurance, which I don't know if you can give me, but is that staff's recommendation?
The staff's recommendation are that the funding levels that are presented in the tip. Again, we can, as we have more information as planning work progresses for the end of this year and into 2025, we anticipate that the funding amounts will change for the out years for 2026 and beyond. In our future tips, and we will also we very much look forward to conversations with council and the community about different funding mechanisms potentially for some of our programs and projects as well. So like I said, really great work. We're really excited about it, but we just need a little bit more time to get there and do anticipate those program levels may change. And then we could consider, of course, it's council's decision along with city manager's office for consideration of adjustments during the mid-buy budget adjustment process for the 2026 budget year. And that would all occur next year as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other, okay, Councilmember Treen.
So if I'm not mistaken, just see if I'm, we've got $2.5 million in studies on the corridors, $4.6 million allocated for connects, which is close to $7 million, which I believe was about a year's allocation of REAP money, give or take 100,000 or 150,000. Are my numbers pretty accurate there? I'm just taking it off the numbers you have here. It's 2.5 and 4.6 on funding. Connects has a little bit more, but I'm looking at one. I just looked at one. I grabbed one number from 2025. What is that one? TR 134. It's got $4.6 million. You got another almost $1 million for the other Connects project funding from 2027. So that's what we're saying here. You guys allocated about $7 million on studies and one project in Connects, which would be at least 1 year of our REAP money.
We have proposed forecasting to move forward and fund through the budget process a 6-year total for our corridor project category of approximately $2.5 million. Again, I anticipate the cost for that program and category may change as we work through all of our corridor studies that will result in different projects throughout the TIP and in future years. For the Connects category, I am seeing about $5.5 million for our 6-year total. Again, forecasted funding for project expenditures.
Yeah, and so based on the presentation that we just received on our evacuation and emergency response, this tip, this current tip that you're presenting to us, doesn't address or distribute monies in what I would consider an appropriate way to provide a higher level of safety to the general public of the city of Sammamish. So it would be really difficult for me to support this TIP plan if it in no way would support the safety of the general public of the city of Sammamish. And then the second thing I would want to address is it seems to me that okay, I have to be careful here. So, Mayor, I don't know if I need to go to executive session at this point, but there seems to be a lack of transparency with this particular tip as to how much this plan actually would benefit the residents, the general public of Sammamish versus benefiting one particular entity. And if that's the case, I wonder how much risk the city is in if we were to approve this. What's the risk level to the city for possibility of being seen as gifting?
I will just say that generally speaking, this is a planning level document. And so it's possible that many of the projects and items listed in this will not actually come to fruition, but these are planning level projects that are identified for, again, future potential needs related to funding. But you know, if your question is about a particular row or project, I mean, feel free to call that out. This is appropriate for public session, open session.
Yeah, so TR 134, which is Southeast 6th Street Improvement Project, to me seems that it may benefit. It doesn't seem like it benefits the general public at all. It seems to be a developer would fully benefit from that.
With all due respect to your comments, Councilmember Treen, that particular project on the south portion of that proposed future road connection would be adjacent to the Lower Common Sammamish Park, which obviously the city owns. So I think that, you know, given that connection to our park, there is potential public benefit for that future road connection.
And what kind of benefit would that be?
Again, it's a road connection. It would allow greater access and greater potential parking to members of the public. So I'm not trying to debate you in any way, Councilmember Treen. I do note that there are potential public benefits related to that. And again, it's just a planning document.
All right, for the record, I just say that I don't support that. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
I am so sorry. I had one other clarifying question. So I know there's project TR18, which is like the Southeast 8th and I think 216th or 218th corridor project, but there's also a sidewalk and non-motorized program project list. And project ID 63.1 is talking about doing a sidewalk on Southeast 8th between 216th and 218th. So I'm still confused why we would have a specific sidewalk project that would add to where we have some sidewalk. It would fill part, like one gap, but it wouldn't actually complete a sidewalk that starts and ends somewhere, and that's part of another project as well. So that seemed a little bit odd to me. Like either sort of fix all of Southeast 8th and have a sidewalk on that whole thing to get us to the Big Rock Park, or just include it all in TR 18. But it seems weird that we have it in both places. Can you clarify that for me?
Of course, and that's a great question, Councilmember. We would like to proceed with our corridor study and finalizing that study, and then the subsequent plan first, so it will be a timing concern. So if I'm guessing, if that, or not guessing, but if the sidewalk, the project in the sidewalk program would not be completed until that corridor study is complete. And again, the phasing plan that results from that corridor study and preferred alternative with the plan may show something else, right? And so those improvements within that sidewalk program may look a little bit different depending on the selection of the preferred alternative by City Council. as we move through that study. So that study would always come first before that smaller improvement would take place.
So I guess my recommendation would be to take that sidewalk off, right? Because like, I can't imagine ever just doing that part of the sidewalk, right? Because there's a partial sidewalk on Southeast 8th already, sort of in the middle. This would be another part of that, but it still wouldn't give you a sidewalk on all of Southeast 8th to get people to the park. So I don't think I'd ever be in favor of just doing this part, right? Like, it's sort of still a bit of a sidewalk to nowhere until we can complete the whole thing. So just because, again, as a planning document, that's a little over $300,000 on a segment that I don't know that we would ever just do that part anyway. So would it be better to just remove that and then wait till we completed the study?
We can. It certainly is fine to remain in the program. The project list is meant to be a revolving list, and we would proceed with sections that are finalized. So if they're part of a greater effort, they wouldn't move forward without a bigger plan in place. And that plan will be the result of both the completion of the corridor study and plan, as well as the bike and ped mobility plan. So both of those will give us a bigger picture. And so what citywide our sidewalks will look like, and shared use paths or bike plans or bike paths, as well as what that specific corridor will look like.
Okay, I'm still confused why that would, like, why that particular segment is on here without the rest of Southeast 8th being completed. And again, the part that's not on there is actually, this part of Southeast 8th actually has a really wide shoulder. So while there's no sidewalk, there is a usable shoulder in this segment. The segment of Southeast 8th that's not listed on here is the part that has no shoulder on either side. So it feels like if we were going to list one segment on here and call it out, we would do the part that is the least safe, right? And not necessarily this part. So I guess I don't understand why we would leave this one on here.
We can certainly adjust that project list. It was just shown so that the community can understand the prioritization system within the program. Again, we do expect that program list to grow substantially with the completion of our bike and ped plan. So we can certainly consider a different section of the street as well, but I don't anticipate that section going forward without the corridor plan being adopted and in place first.
Can you just move that money to what Councilmember Lamb wants, and then we'll be set? Just move the 300,000 to that 200,000. Is that a possibility?
Mayor, I appreciate the thought. I think it's the difference of an individual project versus an ongoing program that requires funding year over year.
But I think that is coming, a motion to add money to it. So
we are happy to pull that money and switch it over if that's the will of council.
So I'm about to close the public hearing, but Deputy Mayor Howe, go ahead.
I'd like to ask a process question. I think the way I'm looking at this list is as a way to prioritize projects that show them in different phases of forward momentum, and that the dollars assigned to them are not, in fact, final unless they are indicated as such. And that if we were to suddenly shift, let's say we put $7 million into sidewalks, let's just do that. What impact would that have on, say, every other project on that list? Would it perhaps destabilize and unbalance them? Are you looking at this also as a way to prioritize work internally within staff, as far as like, here's 35 projects, actually there's more than 35 projects here, and I've got this amount of staff and this amount of time, and I've got this kind of weather and this kind of timing for funding, and when I can actually get stuff done. Does this list kind of reflect that concept?
Yes, Deputy Mayor Howe, it's a great question. It does reflect that. We do meet with our capital planning team, our capital engineers, the traffic team. We meet with almost every department or division within Public Works so that we have a tip that is also implementable. variety of the projects are in their earlier stages, so you'll see different numbers for projects that are advanced further in the planning and design process, such as Lewis Thompson Road, right? That's going to construction. We have a very clear understanding of the final cost for that project. Others are in their infancy stages as we're looking at some of that capital planning work for the corridor. So it is, we have tried to allocate funding fairly evenly across the TIP in different categories, as well as planning for workload for the team for the next year or two.
I mean, I think you certainly heard that the sidewalks are important, and that we're probably going to need to find some kind of alternative funding sources. And it may be something that, as we look at this list, they may have to get prioritized over a different kind of a project, potentially, based on how the council feels about this. But I just wanted to make sure I understood kind of the purpose of this document and what we're trying to push forward on. Thanks, that was very helpful.
All right, council, anything else before I close the public hearing? Okay, this public hearing is now closed. I will entertain a motion for Resolution 2024-1058. So, Deputy Mayor, I believe Councilmember Lamb wants to make an amendment. Were you going to?
I was going to go right for that, yeah. But
You were doing an amendment?
I was just, no.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Lamb?
I'd like to approve the 2025 to 2030 TIP amended to increase sidewalk gap program, that's TRC, to $400,000 for every year up to 2030.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Did you want to discuss that?
No, I think we've talked a lot about sidewalks.
Councilmember Trine, did you want to speak to that motion?
No, I'd like to make an amendment
Oh, no.
to the motion.
Okay. I hate when this happens. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'd like to amend that TR 143 funding for the Southeast 6th Street Improvement Projects Phase A, B, and C, that all funding be removed.
All right, hearing no seconds, that amendment fails. Deputy Mayor Howe, would you like to speak to Councilmember Lamb's amended motion?
Yes, I would, because I'm unclear if the $400,000 is a reasoned amount that is based on foreknowledge of exactly that's what we should be doing. So I have just a concern that we're coming up with a number without background or data that tells us that that's a great number. It might be more, it might be less. I really don't know, but that's my problem. I just don't know.
So Councilmember Trine, did you want to speak to that as well?
No, I'd like to make amendment to the motion.
Okay, just one second. Oh my gosh. An amendment to Councilmember Lamb's?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we would take the funding for TR 126 Northeast Connector Road improvements of the 1st Street to 228th, that all funding from 2027 through the 6-year plan would be removed.
Okay, I'm not hearing any second. That motion fails. Councilmember Lamb, you wanted to speak to your amended 200,000?
Yeah, so we know what the list is for the sidewalk gaps, and there's 12 projects. It is $3.4 million. So if we double that, we can get through that project in half the time, everything that's on that list.
Councilmember Stewart, are you speaking to the motion on the floor?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I absolutely appreciate Deputy Mayor's question, and I think it's a very fair one. We don't know what that number is, but given that this is a planning document, and we know, as Councilmember Lamb pointed out, what the current list is and that list is going to grow, that planning for a larger number, still probably not an adequate number, but a larger number is going to be a more accurate plan. It will also hopefully save us from having to do a ginormous mid-buy adjustment, right? By planning, by having a better number, and we know that more is going to be more accurate, that we will do a better, hopefully we'll get a closer approximation in our budgeting process this year and reduce, mid-buys are typically smaller adjustments as opposed to larger ones. So it probably isn't enough. It probably ought to be even more, but it's probably closer.
Councilmember Trine?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion that's on the table. So ask that under regional projects unfunded TR 19, the WashDOT to SR 202 Sahali Way Northeast intersection be funded with $1.5 million.
All right, not hearing any second. That motion fails. Deputy Mayor Howe, are you speaking to the 200,000 still?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question of staff. So it would help me to understand what impact does this have on your planning, your workload, prioritization of projects, if something like, if there were an increase added to the sidewalk projects. I don't understand what the impact would be to staff.
Thank you for the question. We would likely just need to shift a little bit, and we would likely need to look at bundling several projects at once through design phase and as well as construction phase to deliver on the projects forecast for that year, for that budget cycle.
I'm not sure if I get the downside on that.
We would likely be able to deliver on that program. We may need to take an assessment of all of our projects and programs across the board to see what may have to shift. But I believe we would be able to deliver on that. But like I said, we need to take a look at our workload a little bit. I think it would just be a process change in terms of rolling out several at a time through design phase and construction. Sometimes with that, if they're not in the same location for construction, we may end up paying a little bit more as the sidewalk improvements go in if they're across the city. So we may need to take a look at location of some of those gaps as well.
Okay, so before we vote, I will not be supporting that because I would like more information on what that number looks like and be looking forward to adding to it in the budget process. Councilmember Trine.
Yeah, I will follow suit there, and I will not be supporting the motion as stated.
Anybody else want to speak to that motion on the floor? Okay, Councilmember Gupta.
Yeah, I appreciate Deputy Mayor Howe's point about not knowing what the number is, and I think that is kind of the challenge that we're dealing with, is we don't have that bike ped plan in front of us to tell us what the projects are. I think we all have an idea that it's going to be a lengthy list with a high cost that we don't know how we're going to fund necessarily. But to Councilmember Stewart's point and to the concern I was trying to voice earlier, is I don't want to be in the position of, we know this plan is coming, we know there are going to be projects that we want to implement, and we are only forecasting $200,000, and we're left in a position where, gosh, I really want to get this started in 26, we have all these plans, but to do that we have to make a big biennium adjustment, which maybe there's not an appetite for that, and then we've lost a year. So, and I understand that's not the end of the world, but I think if we are in a position to if we cannot put ourselves in that position, I would prefer to do that.
All right, Councilmember Trine.
Yeah, based on the information that I'm receiving from the rest of the council, I make an amendment to the motion that under regional projects unfunded, that TR 119 or 119 pedestrian pathway along Duthie Hill Road, actually, instead of being unfunded, be funded for the cost of $600,000 to work that pathway for the safety of the residents along there as our #1 priority.
All right, hearing no second, that motion fails. Would anyone else like to speak to the 200,000? Councilmember O'Farrell.
Why not join the party, right? I take Councilmember Gupta's point. I was kind of trying to figure out where I was going to land on this. So I take what you say, Councilmember Gupta, about not maybe losing some time on this, because I fear, and so that makes a lot of sense to me. Everything as we were kind of looking at just seems very arbitrary. And I'm not interested in doing arbitrary because I need to understand what I'm voting on, and just instead of just saying, okay, pick this project, throw that money at it, that does not seem like that is the way to go about planning infrastructure and long-term planning for our city. I do take the point about trying to move the needle on our sidewalk program, so that can make sense to me. And what Councilmember Gupta said about potentially missing an opportunity, a window to move a project like sidewalks that we know our community are looking for, and not waste any time on that. So I would support this motion. But beyond that, I really don't want to start pulling projects off the tip and just saying, how about this, and give that. That does not seem to me to be sound decision making, considering we have a process which is ranking projects based on certain kind of criteria, and they rise or fall to a particular level on the tip. I think that's a much more astute way of making decisions and spending public money. So I will be supporting this motion, but I don't really want to start kind of picking projects and kind of throwing money at it, and then what's the point of having a process?
So I think we've gone round and round. Councilmember Lamb, are you adding something new to the conversation? I think we've all spoken to this. Yeah, I feel like we're more in like a bartering, trying to convince people at the moment. So I would like to continue on. Councilmember Treen, do you have an amendment?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So I'd like to amend under the regional projects that we fund TR 48, which is the King County Sahalee Way SR 202 to the North City limits, as seed money to show the WashDOT that we're serious about it in the amount of $1.5 million.
All right, hearing no second, that motion fails. Councilmember Stewart.
I would like to call the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to call the question.
Thank you. Love it. Okay, so motion on the floor, if anybody can remember, is passing resolution 2024-1058 with an amendment of adding 200,000 to the sidewalk program, I believe it's called. All those in favor say aye, and please raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So, Councilmember O'Farrell, did you swap?
She was an aye.
Aye. So yes, to pass. Okay, so 4-3, that passes. Lovely. Let's take a break. Let's be back in 5 minutes. Okay, I think people are slowly coming back, but it is 9:25. Oh, was I not on? All right, welcome back, everybody. Not all council members are here, so it might take a minute, but you can go ahead and pull up your presentation for the 2025 to 2030 Stormwater Capital Improvement Plan.
Mayor.
I mean, honestly, I would almost just go for it. I don't know where everyone is. Okay, we're good. Go for it.
Okay. Good evening. We are back again. Joining me this evening is Greg Samatio, our Public Works Director, as well as Stephanie Sullivan, our Senior Stormwater Program Manager. And we're very excited to present the final 2025 through 2030 Stormwater Capital Improvement Plan, otherwise known as the SWIP. So we do have a handful of slides, and then we'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, to close the hearing and consider adoption of the SWIP. Go ahead, Greg.
Audrey, Greg, can you hang on for a second? I do not think the TV version is on yet, so hold tight for a moment.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we're good to go. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, council members and Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Greg Stomatio, Deputy Public Works Director. Very, very brief presentation today. Just a reminder of what the SWIP is and what are our team's recommendations for the SWIP today. So the SWIP is made up of two components. The SWIP plan itself, which is Exhibit 1 in your packet, that details the 6-year capital improvement plan for our stormwater utility. Within that is the levels of recommended funding for each of our programs. Within that, up above, quickly as a reminder, within the blue programs are our ongoing annual funded programs. The yellow is our projects, smaller in nature, less than $300,000. The green category is our larger projects, over $300,000. And then the orange is our transportation projects and the stormwater funding levels for the TIP projects that have stormwater components to it. The second component of the SWIP itself is Exhibit 2 within your packet, is the guide. The guide goes hand in hand with this plan here. It lists the overall projects that we have within these various programs. Those projects are prioritized and scored and recommended for the highest level of priorities for funding within the SWIP itself, and then, of course, within our budget cycle upcoming. Exhibit 3 within your packet is the questions and answers that our team has consolidated. We didn't receive very many comments or questions. The majority of those were answered by staff at the last council presentation on the 4th. And then Exhibit 4 is the recommendation itself. So it is our team's recommendation that the mayor concludes the public hearing tonight and adopts the 2025 to 2030 SWIP. And the recommendation motion will be available to bring back up after the public hearing. Thank you. We are, of course, all available for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. We're going to do public comment on this hearing if there is any, and then we'll move to council discussion, closure, and a vote. Okay, Mary.
Good evening, Mary Victor Sammamish. I wanted to talk about more about Tamarack with related to stormwater CIP. I've been put in that it should be listed as a 6NN Tamarack drainage improvements. It is a project. It was identified by the city. All the engineering and things have been done for it. It should be on, the files should be on the city's website so that they won't be lost or forgotten. I have not requested that any year be assigned. I have not requested any money be assigned, but I believe listing it would help it be a project that is at least acknowledged, and it would help with any grant funding that might ever happen. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I sent in. I had sent in a diagram from the cumulative impacts analysis from 2013. Basically, if you have stormwater just the way it is and you're not removing trees and not building, you have about 1% that gets down from the top areas into the water. And when you do the development, it catches in the basin and where it's steep, and you end up with about 20 to 30% runoff, the stormwater runoff that goes. So one of the reasons that that happens, for example, in Tamarack, is in this area, there's been the yellow houses, there's 20 of them. Those have been added, and one by one by one by one, when you build that many houses in, you end up with more stormwater. The stormwater either goes into the ditches that are there that the city's been using, or into the soils that are there, or it's piped directly somewhere else. And there aren't any pipes that connect different stormwater. There's gaps. So it's really important to look at how can those flooding problems be addressed. And so the recommended Tamarack tight line or Tamarack drainage improvements was actually rated as a 65-point project. This is from the Zacus Basin Plan, and it was done. There was an ordinance that the city worked on for a while. It's in 2017, and it's been codified now. That if you have public benefit that exists, the city should quantify the public benefit in relation to the cost. And when there are public benefits, it should be done in a case-by-case analysis. So the city has done private projects before. There's multiple examples of them that I have not provided, but I provided in the past. And there is a methodology for doing it. Also for ranking, because Tamarack was rated above, and then they said, well, it's a private area, so we'll just move it to the side. In Appendix D, it actually was using this resolution 2018-804 that all the other stormwater policies are done. And I've already talked to the fact that there could be public drainage easements for it. We do have existing easements that the sewer and water district use, and they actually prefer. And then the last thing is I sent in our money. We've given you guys $2.6 million in taxes.
Thank you.
$870,000 in stormwater fees, and $80,000 in system development charges. So I hope you'll consider it.
All right. Do we have anyone that signed up for online for the SWIP?
Per the new reasonable accommodation, those who have pre-registered by 3 o'clock today, please raise your hand if you wish to give testimony.
All righty. Hearing none, Council, I will open it up to you for questions or discussion. Councilmember O'Farrell. So I just had a question about process with the SWIP, and in light of Mary's public comment and what she's been sending in. And that Tamarack project is no longer on the SWIP. How easy, with the SWIP and this process, how easy, difficult, arduous is it to add projects in the future? Like if we adopt the SWIP as is tonight and down the road, because I feel like this project, Tamarack, it's something that I need more information on. I need to read more about it and ask more questions, and I have not really to date. And I'd like to learn more about it. But if in the future council decides we'd like to add this back to the SWIP, how easy is that? Is that just something that council can take up itself and add that project back in? I'd like to kind of know how difficult to easy that is.
Well, I'll let Audrey kick it off, and then I'll follow.
Great question, Councilmember O'Farrell. So the SWIP, just like the TIP, has an opportunity to be amended and considered every year. So Council has an opportunity to consider the project list within that. Of course, everything is prioritized and scored with a little bit different criteria. I believe we discussed that in our capital planning meetings earlier this year, but that criteria is followed for every single project that comes out of a basin plan or proposed to be on the SWIP. And we do have an opportunity, like I said, to review every year. There is not a mandate for a SWIP, unlike the TIP. So it is, of course, staff recommendation that we consider a SWIP at least every budget cycle, if not annually going forward. And then with this particular project, and we have addressed that in the Q&A, we do not recommend proceeding with projects located on private property. There's a lot of risk and liability involved when the city does work on private property. And again, to show public benefit. Happy to talk about that particular project anytime with anyone if anyone's ever interested in learning more about that project and the history of it. But in terms of the SWIP process, it is an annual process that we'd like to recommend going forward, but not a mandated process.
Okay.
And thank you, Audrey. And so this is kind of a new process for us. When is the next time the council that comes to us, like for next year, for 2026, if you like? When is the next time we're going to start looking at adding new items to this web?
That is something that every time we complete a study or a plan, we usually end up with a project list, and those projects are ranked and considered about this time every year, usually earlier in the year, around February, March. We can look at timing as the city is forming its first citywide CIP, so that's an additional process that we could look at stormwater projects, and of course with the budget cycle as well.
Okay, so probably beginning of
Early
next year.
next year.
Okay, okay, all right, thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions or discussion before I close the hearing from council? All right, I am closing public hearing for the 2025-2030 Stormwater Capital Improvement Plan. And then I will entertain a motion to pass Resolution 2024-1059. Councilmember Stewart, sorry.
Oh, well, I should wait and see if there are questions. I was going to propose.
No, I just didn't see it there. Yeah, popped up.
Any question? I don't want to.
No, I have nothing.
All right, then I move that we approve the SWIP as presented, because I don't remember what number you just said.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
No, I think Audrey and staff did a great job of presenting. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, council, all those in favor of this SWIP, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Well, thank you, Audrey. Nice to see you, Stephanie. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council. Have a good evening.
Yeah, have a good night. Okay, council, Vicki, thanks for hanging with us. We have the budget philosophy and financial policies.
All right, good evening. Vicki Carlson for the record. I am the new finance director, and I've been with the city for a month now. So still getting my feet wet, but just to give you a little background of who I am to kind of introduce myself. I have been in local government my entire career, so over 36 years, doing all different aspects of accounting. I worked for a city prior to coming to Sammamish, and I also worked for a fire district and a park district. I am a CPA, and I've been doing budgeting for close to 20 years. Budgeting is kind of a passion of mine, and so my latest endeavor with budgeting has been to become a member of the Rethinking Budgeting Committee with GFOA. GFOA, if you're not familiar with that organization, is the Government Finance Officers Association. It is a national organization that provides training, research, best practices, and other guidance to government finance professionals for the United States and Canada. The committee is made up of members across the country, and it was formed back in 2020 with the intent of updating local government budgeting practices to take advantage of new ways of thinking, new technologies, and to better meet the changing needs of communities across the country. So as, it looks like go ahead and change the slide. Catch up there, yeah. So we've been taking a deep dive into basically all elements of the budgeting process. I've put a few on this slide just for your reading pleasure. If you're interested in seeing all of the elements that we've looked into from the budgeting perspective, I would highly encourage you to go to the GFOA website and just look up Rethinking Budgeting, because there's a lot of research papers, articles that are written that are published out there. Next slide. So why change the budgeting philosophy and the budgeting process? So as I mentioned, there's new ways of thinking about budgeting. There's new technologies that weren't available a long time ago. And our communities across the country have changed, and our city is not immune to those changes. We have changed and grown as well. So if you look back at how Sammamish was 25 years ago when it was first incorporated, population was roughly 34,000, and we're now at over 68,000. We have a much higher population, and this is not just specific to Sammamish, this is across the country. Now, a third of our population is foreign-born. So just as an example of something that's changed is we never used to talk about translating government documents and government services so more people can access the services that we provide. There's been economic environment changes as well that we've had to deal with. Statewide initiatives, just to name two of them. Property tax revenues. The restrictions on revenue growth for property taxes is significantly different. Back when I started budgeting pre-2000, we could increase taxes, property taxes up to 6% plus new construction. And now we're capped at 1% increases plus new construction. And if you think back to just a couple years ago when inflation was what, 9.5%? That was the highest inflation we've had in close to 40 years. And a 1% increase in our largest revenue source doesn't begin to keep pace with our rising costs. How sales tax revenue is distributed among cities has also changed. You know, it used to be point of sale. Now it's destination based. So I go to the mall, I buy a product, I ship it to my home. Under the old method, the city where the mall is located gets the sales tax. Now I go to that same mall, I make that same purchase, I ship it to my home, the city where I live gets that sales tax. And then there's unfunded mandates that are coming down from the state. And just a couple of examples, required training for police officers. Those are always changing. We have more and more requirements, and those costs are incorporated into the contract we have with King County sheriffs. A recent one that came through was just a couple years ago, deals with extreme heat rules, right? We never used to have to think about our employees out working outside in extreme heat conditions, and now we do, which is the right thing to do, right? We need to protect our employees, but there's a cost to that. And then there's environmental changes, right? So there's climate change. You know, 20 years ago, we weren't really talking about climate change during the budgeting process, and now we are. When you see the budget come forward in a few months, you're gonna see a proposal in there for building out the infrastructure for electronic vehicles, right, to replace our gas fleet. And human services needs. I think the current budget has $683,000 for the current biennium. And then best practices are also updating to reflect the times we live in now. These changes are necessary to ensure the long-term financial sustainability for our city, to provide core government services, as well as maintain our infrastructure and other capital assets. So what is going to change? So first of all, how we budget. The budget that's going to come forward is going to be a budget based on current level of services plus inflationary increases that we know are going to happen, plus any new initiatives or decision packages that are approved. What will no longer be included in the budget is the budget for what-ifs or unknown, unplanned costs. So the way I view this is a partnership between staff and council. So staff, we're committing to bringing forward a realistic budget based on current level of services. However, if one of those significant unknown, unplanned events does occur, we may need to come to council for a budget amendment. Also, greater transparency. So one of the things we're looking at is where certain expenditures are being recorded. That needs to change. The general fund really needs to be ongoing operational costs and significant maintenance like the pavement management, sidewalk management, those types of programs, and the large capital projects, as an example, town center, those need to be accounted in a different fund, not the general fund. We need to make the general fund be strictly ongoing operational costs. Another change is we're going to be creating the first capital improvement plan for the city. It's a very common practice for cities, so we're developing ours. This is going to show the citywide capital needs for the next 6 years. You'll have the ability to see the big picture and better understand how the decisions that are being made today will affect the decisions that will be made in the future. By creating this 6-year CIP document, transparency and trust should be improved, and we'll have greater accessibility to all of this information by combining information into one document. And it's going to line up with current best practices. Just one example is ongoing expenditures should be paid for with ongoing revenues. So you're going to see that illustrated throughout this budget document. When you receive the budget document later this year, you're going to receive the complete budgeted document, which is different from what you've had in the past. It's going to include not only the dollars, but the why behind why we're budgeting what we're budgeting. If you want to refresh your memory as to what that budget document is, it's on the website, but the new document will include the CIP as well. The other thing I wanted to mention is we did include in the packet some updated financial policies. They are draft right now. There's a comprehensive list of financial policies that will be guiding our budget process as well as some of our day-to-day operations. As a best practice, they should be reviewed and updated as needed on a regular basis, typically as part of the biennial budget process. We're aligning them with current best practices. These policies will confirm that we are complying with state law as well as governmental accounting standards. The updated policies will reflect the current budget direction that I just spoke of. They are high level. These policies that are in this packet, again in draft form, will be replacing the policies that are in the current budget document, and we'll be presenting them to you later on this year for formal adoption. The reason they're in draft form right now is I'm still new to the city, right? So I still want to review them a little bit more and make sure that we've got them correct before they come forward for final adoption. And some of these financial policies are tied to other financial policies that have been adopted by council. So we need to step through the process. So 2 examples are, we do have a council adopted fixed asset policy that speaks to a threshold of $5,000. That dollar amount is very old. It needs to be updated. So we need to bring that policy forward to get those thresholds updated. Also incorporate some new GASB statements that we're required to follow. And then also we need to update the reserve policy and I need to see if there's any other policies that need to be updated. So we'll get those policies updated and then bring back these in final form for adoption later this year. A lot more to come as we move through the budget process. Departments are currently drafting their budgets for the next biennium, and I am continuing to familiarize myself with our community and city government so I can speak to the budget when it is presented to you later this year. I'm starting to work through those financial policies that will need council action. I'm hoping to get them ready for presentation in September. We're continuing the public outreach process, and I'm going to be working on the budget presentations and what that looks like as it comes forward. One final item that I do want to mention is I did receive an email earlier today that had some questions on the financial policies, particularly relating to the reserves. I think they require a little bit more detailed answers, so what I want to do is respond via email, and I'll get that out to you in the next few days. And with that, again, this was just meant to be a high level, introduce the new budget process, introduce myself, and I'll stop talking and happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thank you. And I know we have we're almost bumping up our 10 p.m., which has not happened in a long time. But let's see where we get. Deputy Mayor Howe.
Welcome to the city, and thank you for being here. We're delighted to have you on staff. And I know that other staff echo this as well. I have just a couple of comments. The document was extremely helpful to go through. It's laid out in an organized way that makes perfect sense, and so that I really feel like I understand all the capacity and programs that you're trying to, wrap your arms around at this point. I had a question around the public outreach. You say that you're doing it, did you say now?
We're working through what that looks like. We've already done some public outreach through the statistically valid survey that was done earlier.
Gotcha.
And we're talking about how we can continue that outreach through the budget process.
Okay, that's great, because that is a component that I wasn't sure that I saw reflected in here, that I would love to see, if it's not have it be more expanded, because that budget piece gets repeated over and over and over again, in particular as we get to budget time. I know that it's tricky and it's hard, but I have great confidence that you'll manufacture a spectacular educational piece that will really help inform the public. The other question I had to do with ESG. I was wondering if, as we look at our finances and where we have institutional monies housed, if ESG is a component of this at all in terms of ethical practices. It falls into the DIB thing.
So I'm familiarizing myself with that right now. So if I can loop back on that question.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
I just want to say welcome and thanks for the draft document. I'm super excited also by the comment that you made in your presentation about sort of removing the what ifs. I'm hoping that also means when we start talking about contingencies, I think one of the things we've had historically in our budget is sort of contingencies on top of contingencies, and I'm all about having a reasonable and somewhat conservative budget. But I do want to make sure we kind of take some of the contingencies on top of contingencies out so that in some cases, I feel like we've gone too far with that, right? So is that, I think that's what you're getting at, but I just wanted to see if you could clarify
That is part of it, absolutely.
Perfect. So I'm super excited. I hope that we get to talk more. Scott's probably already warned you that I have lots of budget questions, but thanks.
Councilmember Lamb?
Welcome. Last year, we had a fiscal sustainability committee that had a few recommendations, and I was just curious whether or not fiscal sustainability would be coming back to us this coming year, and in what form?
So again, being new to the city, I have access to the document, and I've just started to read through that one. So more to come at a later date. I can't really answer that question right now.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gupta?
Thank you and welcome. Happy to have you here. I had a very quick question. I think the fee schedule, it mentioned it should be evaluated at least biannually. Does that include impact fees?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything. But yeah, Vicki, we're really excited to have you. Budget is my least favorite. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, but yeah, Pam helps me balance this out. So, but definitely looking forward to seeing what you're bringing to the table. Really excited to have all your experience here as well. So,
Thank
yeah,
you. Happy
we're
to be here.
excited. Yeah, great. Awesome. Thank you, Vicki. All right, Scott.
I'll be quick to stay within our 10 p.m. time cap. Couple of quick items. Just a reminder, City Hall is closed tomorrow in honor and celebration of Juneteenth. So just no one will be here. You're welcome to come by. The market will be going. We do staff the market, but City Hall itself will actually be closed tomorrow. So just want to remind folks of that. And then we are super excited tonight to have a couple of interns that are working with Carrie's firm. One of them is still here with us tonight. One tapped out and said, "Uncle." But Meg is Sammamish born and raised, so we're super excited to, very excited to have her with us tonight. And we missed her partner Hannah. Hannah had to leave, but appreciate Carrie bringing them out tonight to learn about local government, being a local government attorney, and sitting through our 3.5-hour meeting. Please, Carrie.
Okay, if I may, I'll make this quick, but fun fact about Hannah and Mag, they're both rising 3L law students at Seattle University Law School and classmates of our very own Mayor Clark.
Yes, we have a stellar class. Yeah.
A couple other quick items, just reminders, a couple of upcoming dates. Believe it or not, 4th of July is just 2 weeks away. So want to remind the community and invite you out to come join us here at the City Hall complex and Lower Commons Park for our 4th of July celebration. It's going to be fantastic. And we will be sending out more information to council as we get a little bit closer for specifics, but looking forward to seeing our community out with us. And since this is our Jubilee year, we have a couple updates coming up this summer. I want to remind folks about our July 16th meeting. We are inviting our former electeds and community leaders to come join us for a reception ahead of that council meeting. Really looking forward to seeing all those folks out and honoring and recognizing them. And then our Jubilee celebration is Friday, August 16th. We are very excited. We're going to be out on the plaza. We have live music. We have food trucks. I believe we have wine vendor, beer and wine vendor. So it should be a great event. And we're looking forward.
Yes.
I specifically didn't say anything about booths. So I want to encourage all the community to come out and join us. It should be a great event. The Sammamish Symphony is one of those that are participating, along with a couple other great musical acts. So looking forward to seeing everyone come join us. So with that, Mayor, back to you.
Great, thank you. All right, Council, do you have anything to report? Yeah, Councilmember Lamb.
I have a Board of Health meeting tomorrow, and I sent out the agenda for that. I have a Solid Waste Committee meeting on Friday, and I still owe everybody the agenda. Thanks.
Councilmember O'Farrell?
Just to let council know that Councilmember Gupta and I, along with City Manager, will be attending the Association of Washington Cities Conference. We'll be going very early tomorrow morning, back Friday. So there you go.
Great. Well, thank you for representing. All right. On that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second?
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Good night, everybody.